follow-up. I'm sorry.
That's all right, Mayor. Mayor, I do not have any follow-up.
Does anybody from around council have any meeting follow-up? Very good. We will move on to the Advanced Casper Economic Development Joint Powers Board. Do you have something, Mr. City Manager, or Acting City Manager? What am I supposed to call you? Besides Mr. Brown.
Mayor, Councilor, anything's fine. But I do, we do have Justin Farley here tonight with Advanced Casper, and he's here to give us an update on the workings for Advanced Casper and what's going on. Also important to note that we are in the last year. I believe it was a 10-year agreement, and we're in the last year of that contract agreement between the city of Casper and Advanced Casper. And so again, I guess the only direction we'd have tonight would be is that, council has some feeling or direction on how they would like to move forward with renewing that agreement. So with that, I would entertain the council and the mayor. I'd turn it over to Mr. Farley.
Thank you. Mr. Farley.
Mr. Mayor, long time no see. And
Yeah.
and it was just as a correction, 7-year agreement that we're up on there. And I would like to start first, Mr. Mayor and council, by thanking all of you for participating in our shooting complex meetings that had gone on. And I would especially like to thank Zulima for all of her awesome work on this. Very frustrating conversation and a lot of time spent. You can't make people make the right decisions. So we will dust that off and see where we go next. But really, I think the consolidation of all of our elected officials, I think that we had a great presentation again. Thank you for doing it. So I only have about 45 pages of notes that we'll go through. It'll be very brief. I'd like to start first of all with just the structure of the organization. There's always been some confusion about the Economic Development Joint Powers Board and Advanced Casper. They are two, in fact, separate entities. The Economic Development Joint Powers Board has two city council members, you know who you are, on that board, and two county commissioners on that board, and then a board chair at large, which would be Mark Pepper. Advanced Casper, we facilitate those meetings, non-voting member. I am in charge and tasked with managing their portfolio as far as making sure they're getting a good return on the dollars that they do have that are separate. I also am in charge of bringing them deals. So the example of how they've accumulated their own resources or funds over time is the McMurray Training Center. And they partnered with the state. They built the McMurrays to build that facility. They were basically the mortgagors. They received payment, 0% interest, very favorable terms. When they sold that facility, those dollars went back to the Joint Powers Board. Those dollars then we used to deploy in future projects. Their current funding, they are sponsors of Proud to Host the Best. They do the College Finals Rodeo. They helped in paving the parking lot at the Ford Wyoming Center, and they are a big sponsor of our Startup Challenge. So Advanced Casper, separate entity, basically contracts with that Joint Powers Board to do economic development in the city and county of Natrona. So like them, we have our own pool of resources that we've accumulated over a period of time, both by projects and dues paid by our members. The dollars that the city provide, along with the county, goes into the Joint Powers Board, and 96% of those funds then deploy back to Advanced Casper to use for operations. The rough breakdown of that is, of that 96%, 51% of those funds are used for staff, 36% are used for operations, and 13% is used in marketing. So Advanced Casper, the organization formerly known as Casper Area Economic Development Alliance, which again, I hope obvious why we changed that name. We have a board as well. Our structure is currently, we have 8 investment level members, 10 elected officials or 10 elected board members and 5 community partners. So we have 23 boards. For a guy who's always worked for himself, now I have close to 30 bosses, which is a little difficult at times, but great. They're all good people. We have done a lot of great stuff. So again, like the Economic Development Joint Powers Board, an example of how we have accumulated some of our resources is when I first came on, we had the spec building out in Bar None on Tonopah. I was tasked with getting that building offloaded off our books. It was costing us an exorbitant amount of money over the year to both insure it, pay the power, that we didn't have taxes because we were a nonprofit, but sold that building. It had gone beyond the state recommendations for any of the clawback that they have on the monies that they had put in there. Those dollars then come back to Advanced Casper. We put that aside in CDs and investments in our portfolio to do other projects. So some of the projects that we have done, past incentive programs, who paid or helped pay for the expenses of moving 40 Rentals, which is a gunsmithing rental tool company from Whitefish, Montana. We helped with the moving expenses for EVI, which is a medical device company, relocate here from Washington State. We paid for part of the expenses for Titus Wastewater Solutions to relocate here from Central Oregon. Titus brought himself, his family, and then 3 other families. So he brought his whole workforce, had about 8 trucks. We by no means paid for the entire move because that would have been a substantial amount, but we most definitely put a meaningful amount in there to offset that cost. This program really was effective in both rolling out kind of the red carpet for new people in our community, new businesses. It helped with that communication, and we keep touch base with them periodically to see how their experience in Casper's going. Excuse me. We also contributed to the MRG, which is a topic I'm sure you're all very aware of, and a conversation probably for another evening. We contributed to the paving of the parking lot at the Ford Wyoming Center, along with the Economic Development Joint Powers Board. We committed money to the option purchase for the property at the shooting complex that you were all very much involved in. We've committed matching funds to the city of Evansville on a project that they're working on for Mesa to build a new campus out there. We also were responsible for several events. We've done the aerospace and defense event every year. We are not going to do that this year. We have instead pivoted, and we're working with a company that is in turn working with L&H, and they are proposing to build microreactors. They want to use the state of Wyoming as their supply chain. They currently build 2 microreactors every year, nuclear reactors that go into either a submarine or an aircraft carrier. So they've jumped through all the hoops and cut through the red tape of actually being a company that is allowed to do such things. Turns out the federal government doesn't let just everybody build a reactor, especially when you have uranium involved. So we hosted a meeting with them to introduce them to our industry. Very similar skill set, high pressure vessels, heat exchangers. A lot of the technology is the same as the energy development. So it was very well received. And we're going to move forward with that. That's the direction that we're going to. Really felt like the aerospace and defense had kind of run its course. We are seeing more people from the state than we were industry. So we've just kind of come back from that. We'll certainly revisit it. It's not a forever thing, but right now this is the direction that industry has indicated to us as to where we should go. So the state recently cut funding to Impact Wyoming that used to be in charge of the Startup Challenge. So they then took roughly 8 months, put out an RFP. We in fact participated in that RFP, Advanced Casper did. We were a bit hesitant because they wanted somebody to run the Startup Challenges statewide. It's important enough to our community that we would have figured that out, but we were quickly denied that RFP. So they awarded the contract to Silicon Couloir out of Jackson. They then requested for another year to do a gap analysis, which begs the question of what they were doing prior to that. So we just decided that we would have our own Advanced Casper Startup Challenge. The Economic Development Joint Powers Board and Tiffany Gamble have both provided prize money for that. We basically ran that in the past. The incubator will still provide some space for us. We brought on Jared Stack and Eric Schlitt to help in this process, two guys that have been in that incubator for the last 7 years to help with their expertise. We'll still do the boot camp. We have marketing classes with Loom. We're going to move forward with this because in the past it's really allowed for 6 new businesses to prop up in our area, which is truly economic development. And we thought that very important to our own community. So again, just pivoted into a new responsibility. And again, with the resources and running an A&D conference and some of that, you have to consolidate. You are all well aware of budgets and how to work that. We are still a participant and facilitate in the Breakthrough 307 Venture Capital Fund. Fund number 1, we deployed capital into 11 different companies. 2 have exited, 7 are still active. We're in fund number 2 now with 7 companies, 2 based out of Casper. It's a $2.5 million fund. The first one was a $2 million fund, and we're about 60% deployed out of fund number 2. That's worth mentioning. The first fund being $2 million. Those are all companies we participate with. Well, we facilitate and then got to participate Cheyenne Leads and the University of Wyoming Foundation. So we have 2 large municipalities and the state's only 4-year college that participate in that fund, and it's going very well. So you may remember our Foslock deal, the Australian company that used bentonite to treat water. We, along with the Economic Development Joint Powers Board, when I say we, I mean Advanced Casper, and the state pulled our resources and bought a facility out on Pyrite for their U.S. location. Their intent was to use onshore their manufacturing and take it out of China. That Foslock is still a thing. That deal did not transpire. They had quite a shakeup at their leadership. There's all new leadership there. They've kept the 1 employee in the U.S. Who happens to be in Casper, Wyoming, as their U.S. management. So they are still out there. However, we didn't have time to sit on that asset. It's not our goal to be property owner in Casper. So when one door closes, they say, another opens. So that door that opened was a historic snowstorm that collapsed the roof of the American Roller Molding, aka Wild Gear. With that historic snowstorm and that building collapse, they went into a temporary space where they only had room for 1 machine. The consequence of that is the other machine wasn't running. They had to outsource all of that and those jobs to a company in Ohio. So we went back to them with the same structured deal that we had with Foslock, offered them the facility, which would give them the room to bring bulk roller molding back in in operation, allow them to bring those jobs back to Wyoming. And so they are our new tenant, as it were. Extended the same terms, again, very aggressive, very favorable terms. We don't compete with private sector. It's not our intent to be a landlord. We simply facilitate deals, allow those companies then to use their capital to bring that back online and do the many improvements that they need to do at that pilot building. Our newest and greatest endeavor is the foreign trade zone. It's been a topic discussed at length. So Advanced Casper, we positioned ourselves with the help of a consultant out of New York that we share with the Scottsdale Mint and Wyoming Reserve gentlemen. We're going to have Garrett Goostrey, who was the portfolio manager and is portfolio manager for Breakthrough 307. He's going to be our third-party provider within Advanced Casper. So the goal with this is that, well, we have a facility at the airport that's in the magnet side of the foreign trade zone. Advanced Casper will take on the responsibility of the reporting and the liability that a company that perhaps would like to explore the benefits of a foreign trade zone will not have to go through the expense of that. Now, this all started with a company out of Italy that manufactures firearms, and they would like to use Casper as a logistics hub where they could bring their inventory into the foreign trade zone, avoid paying any of those tariffs until they then send it to their retailers. So the long-term goal for this is we'll get our Italian friends into their new facility, but it's a large facility. So we would like to treat it more as an incubator model where we can take Wyoming companies or other companies that might in fact benefit from using the foreign trade zone, but again, don't have the resources to spend on the liability or the training or the certifications that they need in order to do so. And we can allow them the space in there to, explore that benefit with the hope that the company gets in there, they understand what it is, and then grow like any incubator to where they graduate out into their own. So we've always had that option. It's just never been utilized. Like everything in Wyoming, we struggle with the economy of scale to get companies into that position. We feel like this is the way that we prove that model out. Dale, God rest his soul, certainly is sadly missed. He delayed this process quite a bit, but that's how that works. Our most current, in addition to the other things that I've just gone through, we have 2 new companies from California that are looking to relocate here. One, we're modeling something around like the pyrite where we buy a facility. Excuse me. We buy a facility, rent that facility back to them at a very favorable in very favorable terms where then they could have the option to purchase us back out of that. One's an aerospace company. They would like to bring their manufacturing back. Both are manufacturing companies. Both have 8 to 15 jobs apiece. We're working on some rezoning to build. They want to build their own facility. We'll offer to offset some of those costs. We have a brand new company in Casper by the name of Icarus, who manufactures some phenomenal gun-related accessories. They were at our meeting with the SHOT Show. They still have an enormous amount of operations going on in Washington State. At some point, they're going to need to move those assets into Wyoming. We are here to help them do that. Happy to have them in our community. And so that's really what I have for this evening as to hopefully a good overview of what the Joint Powers Board and Advanced Casper is all about, and I'll stand for some questions if you have.
Questions? Todd?
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Justin, for all the info. I was just curious, so I remember reading an Oil City article about Titus relocating here. A lot of the other companies were unfamiliar to me, though. For folks interested in the work that you and Advanced Casper are doing and kind of past successes, is there a good place to find all that kind of packaged together for easy reference? Or how would you recommend folks informing themselves further?
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, thank you for that question. That's kind of a fine line with us in that it's not really our responsibility to get out in front of the industry or the companies that we've recruited here and to kind of take their headline. So we don't particularly promote that. Obviously within the council, we like to keep everybody updated, but maybe we should get some permission from them to post it on our website as successes. We did recently have a group come in and do some video content, and they interviewed like well, I don't know if they did Scottsdale, but Lewis and a few other people that had just relocated here so that we could use that in our marketing, social media and things like that, to have video content and interview people like, why did you choose Casper? So I think that would probably be a pretty easy conversation with most of them. So I'll definitely explore that.
Cool. Could I sneak in one more follow-up? I guess I wasn't aware that the legislature had cut funding for Impact 307 throughout the state. Can you quantify what that historical amount was that we were able to leverage for entrepreneurs and stuff in the community, and how much you're having to make up through ulterior means?
Well, to be clear, it was the business council and not particularly the legislature. So, and to quantify that, I can't particularly, just because they operated incubators not only here, but in Sheridan. They were starting one in the Land or Riverton area. And what they tried to take the model that was working here and spread it across the state. And to be fair, it probably didn't work everywhere. And so Business Council wasn't happy with the results and then cut that funding, which I believe they're going to go from several employees down to maybe a couple, and they'll just be at the University of Wyoming. They've given every indication they're going to keep this incubator. Sheridan has basically shut down everything. We felt that it was too important to our community to do that. So this was our roundabout way of fixing it.
Thanks.
You bet.
Vice Mayor?
When you end up having an asset that is just kind of left not for its intended purposes, what do you typically do? Do you try to resell that to somebody else? Do you try to sell it back to investors? What do you do with those?
So fortunately, we haven't had that issue. The terms that we have with the companies that are in those buildings, there is a 5-year lease with an option that they need to exercise within that 5 years, and we sell it back to them at the price we paid for it in the beginning. So there's no markup or anything like that, and it's built into that original lease. If we were in the case of like we had an asset that we needed to get out of, like the pyrite, or excuse me, like the Tonquah property, we simply put it out to all the commercial brokers. We did not do a listing agreement with any one broker, but brought deals and then paid the commission to the broker that brought the deal. You bet.
Any other questions from council?
Last one, I promise. I think.
You should.
Maybe, we'll see. We'll play by ear. Justin, I was curious, in the past few meetings, I've brought up things like, so we recently adjusted our ordinance to remove, somebody might have to help me out, but sheathing around electrical conduit or cable. It was seen as an overly restrictive regulation that wasn't in line with the International Electricians Code. Probably butchering a lot of the details on this, but anyways. I also had asked Lisa Burge when she was here last week about the Kensington Heights division that she is planning, about the kind of multi-tenant structures that she had originally planned for. What I was trying to solicit is how the city of Casper can do a better job, you know, whether it's providing incentives for folks to develop the things that we'd like to see more of in our community, or reducing overburdensome regulation. What do you see as Advanced Casper's role in that? Is that outside the scope of your purpose, or do you see you having a role in advocating for ordinance change and other things that we can do to help make business development flourish in the community?
Mr. Mayor and Councilor, thank you for that question as well. Let's, so myself, as the head of the Advanced Casper, we try to stay very apolitical with my board. In fact, for instance, if a company comes or an individual comes to our board and has a problem with restrictive part of the city that's causing them, you know, pain, and my board then collectively discusses and directs me to come to you and hopefully make a change in that. That's kind of the protocol. That's how that would work. So to be, you know, cautionary to go out and look for problems, because we'll find them. So if you're getting kickback, or you're getting people that are talking about restrictive government, you know, hindering their ability to advance Casper, then definitely we would listen to that and see if there is a way that we could, as a board and as an entity, help do that. Whether it's incentivized or whether it's, you know, communicating it to you. I haven't had that from our private sector, where they told me personally that they've struggled with the council or the city.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? We appreciate the update.
Well, thank you. Thanks for your time. Again, thank you for everything you did earlier too.
You bet. Appreciate it. I guess next on the agenda is the Casper Ice Arena expansion fundraising update.
And Mr. Mayor, members of the council, they're here to give us an update, the folks from doing fundraising. But I also think it might be very helpful to have Ms. Lopez give us a brief little update on the history there. You know, council has agreed to contribute some money towards that project. They've agreed to do the fundraising. In the meantime, in that process, you know, the cost of the estimated cost of the structure has gone up. And so I think a little bit of an overview on the history might be helpful prior to the presentation from the hockey folks.
Very good. Ms. Lopez.
Mayor, councilors, good evening. So just to give you, you know, a brief history, sort of tee off, letting the Casper Amateur Hockey Club give you their update. I do want to just remind you of a couple of things. This project has been many, many years in the making. It was a proposal that was submitted to the city long before I became your Parks and Rec director. So even before my time, this was an idea to add a second sheet of ice to our ice arena to expand our capacity and hopefully decrease our subsidy at that facility. And so, you know, when I began in 2021, I picked up the ball and kind of helped run it, hopefully to the end zone, to the finish line. But it started out with an update to a feasibility study that was done right around the time of COVID. And so city leadership recognized that because of the nuances of COVID and the changes that created for our community, we needed an update to understand where we were in terms of a second sheet and the feasibility of a second sheet in our community. And so that update was completed in 2022. And at that time, the feasibility study came with a concept that was estimated at $13.2 million. And so we came to council, we proposed along with the business plan, saying that we do believe, based on the feasibility study and improvements that we've made in our own operation, that a second sheet would nearly eliminate the subsidy, which right now is annually in the vicinity of $250,000 for the facility. And so staff recommended that with the help of the Casper Amateur Hockey Club, we would try to construct the second sheet. And graciously, council said, okay, we'll support this project and we're willing to put up $3.2 million to get it done if the Amateur Hockey Club and their partners could come up with the balance, which at that time would have been about $10 million. So at that time, and I don't want to steal their thunder or speak for them, but fundraising efforts began, and it became very evident pretty quickly to them that they needed a bona fide design in order to show their donors and their partners what their investments would be buying, and to understand the total cost of the project more fully, and to develop a timeline for when the project would be completed. And so they came to us and said, we will fund 100% of the design if you'll let us get this done so that we can offer more detail to our donors. And that design contract was executed in late 2023 for just over $530,000. So fast forward to today, the design is 95% complete. Pretty darn close. And so with that, I will let the fundraising team give you an update on where the project is at and explain their request for an extension.
Thank you, Zalima, and I'm Glenda Thomas and represent part of the efforts to get this fundraising started, specifically with the Casper Amateur Hockey Club. And we're very grateful for the money that was set aside by the City Council. We're also very grateful for Zalima and her team and everything they've done to get us to this point. As she stated, we did feel it was really important to have a design that had costs and details associated with it. So the hockey club was willing to fund the full extent of the design. And with that, we had Pope Construction working side by side with the architect to give us real-time cost estimates. So as they were doing this, we could quickly eliminate things that were way out of the budget and yet still be able to come up with a design that will fulfill all of the needs that we're looking at. So the design was just really recently completed, and we've been able to update all of our marketing materials and have started having some very private conversations with donors. So to date, we have $2 million raised. And part of the fundraising world is it's really important to have kind of a quiet phase while you're doing it and be able to talk to donors specifically. This project is a little different in that we are dealing with the city and the public side by side. So what we're asking is that we could have a little bit more time to talk to some of our larger donors. And I had some meetings this week that are going very positively. The hockey community, I would say figure skating community, we're looking at curling, and Chad has done a really good job of looking at all the different user groups, Natrona County School District, everybody that really uses this, and be able to have those conversations. So we're asking for a little bit more time to be able to continue this now that we have our design and our marketing materials to be able to share what this might look like.
Does anybody have any questions? Vice Mayor.
How much time are you asking for?
I think what we'd agreed to talk with a little bit with Zalima is till December 1st.
And you said you have raised how much?
We have $2 million.
2 million.
December 31st. Thank you. I would say the 2 million plus we've also paid the 500,000 for the design.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Glenda, for the information. $500,000 for the design, already done. 3 million set aside from the city, raised 2, so we're at 5.5. Our memo says it looks like it's gonna be $20 million, probably go that after it's all said and done. How much faith, that seems like a super ambitious fundraising, and I know hockey folks are very passionate, so maybe it's totally in line with their sentiments, but that seems like a tall ask. So do you mind if you can provide any other information? I know conversations with donors are, sometimes not ready for public announcement and stuff like that, but it seems very ambitious, which awesome, but
Mayor, Councilman, I think that, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup was last night, so hopefully that makes people even more excited about hockey, but fundraising is really an unknown. And so I'd like to stand up here today and say, yes, we're committed 100% to doing this. I feel like there's the right people in Casper that want to make this happen. It's a matter of, now that we have the design done, being able to show them and get these meetings set up quickly. So it is ambitious. I'm willing to work as hard as I possibly can to do this because it's really important.
Does the amateur hockey club plan on making those designs? It sounds like they just got completed. Will you guys be publishing them, or will they be for public? I would love to see them. So, that's the reason I.
Mayor and Councilman, yes, we have all of that. We've got a YouTube video, we've got marketing material, we've got designs that we'd be happy to share and show.
If there's anything in the public realm that I can share, we can share, give exposure to, and help generate the hype, that's great too.
I think that's great. If we could have a little bit of time, just having some of these meetings first, and then I think it'd be really important that people know what we plan to build and what we want to build.
Councilor Pollock.
Thank you. Can you refresh my memory? I know that, I think if I understand it correctly, your group has also, upped your fundraising goal from what we originally discussed, based on the fact that the project, has come in at a higher, dollar figure than we were initially anticipating. So can you tell me, the adjustment that you have made in your fundraising goals? I think we still have a gap that Kyle was alluding to, but, what has the club done, in terms of what you're initially shooting for to what you're shooting for now?
Great, Mayor, Council. I think that there is a gap, and that might be part of the next conversation with the 6 cent. There are some pieces to the design that were added that will be revenue generators for the city as a city-owned facility. Zalima was talking about the subsidy decreasing. Some of the things we've done with some seating options and more like box seats, really, I think will be huge revenue generators for the city. So part of that gap, I would say, is we really did some neat things in the design to make it more sustainable long-term. And I think between the city and hockey and figure skating, or the nonprofit piece of this, that gap can be filled because of the way the design worked out.
Any other questions?
Mayor, councilors. I'm not sure that I may have understood your question a little bit differently. So initially, when we had the feasibility study that estimated the project cost at $13.2 million, the city's commitment was 3.2, which made hockey's commitment $10 million, right? So now it's a $20 million project, and they're committing 12 potentially to get the project completed. And as Glenda alluded to, there's another discussion to be had in terms of a potential project on the 6 cent ballot. But at this point, even with that funding, if you were to select that project to move forward, the hockey club would be committing to an extra 2 million in fundraising from where they originally started. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Brower, have we received a copy, as far as the city is concerned, of their design?
Mr. Mayor, that's something I would have to ask Ms. Lopez.
Mayor, councilors. So we have been intimately involved in the design since day one. In fact, the contract with the architect was a three-way contract that outlined the funding, as well as the obligation to the architect, and the ownership of the design by the city. So the city owns the design. It was funded by the Amateur Hockey Club, but we have all been involved in the design from day one. And so we meet pretty much every other week for the last 7 months, to kind of hash out all of the details and make sure that the facility that we're designing meets the needs of the clubs that utilize it, as well as our rec programming and what Chad and his staff need, to operate a really functional and efficient facility. And so just the long answer to that is yes, absolutely. I mean, we do have the design in hand at any time. We have access to all of the materials that they have access to. We just, out of respect for them and their fundraising efforts, have not disseminated that, but we do have access to it, absolutely.
I appreciated your long answer because I was gonna have a follow-up to ask how it fit with everything. So you answered it all. Thank you very much. Any other questions from council? Did you have something else to add?
No.
Oh, okay. Very good. We will consider it then as we go forward. Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I guess, do we want to make a decision now on whether we want to extend it, or do we want to do that as we discuss 6M? Do it now? Are we willing to go ahead and extend the deadline? Looks like your request to extend the deadline will be worked out.
Thank you very much.
You bet. On to the 6th projects. Mr. Brown, here we go.
Mayor, members of the council, we get the task today to consider these projects that are available for the 6th. So I want to give a little information, or kind of set the stage, if you will, before we get started. As we all know, the county commission approved our right to go out for 6-cent sales tax question on November 5th of this year. And the way the proposed question is set up is that there'll be a kind of a la carte method. This is again a method that's been used in Laramie County and other counties with some success, where each one of the individual projects that council chooses to be on the ballot will be voted for either yay or nay, up or down, by the voting public of the city of Casper. So these will only be voters that reside within the city of Casper limits. And so it's important. So what we want to do tonight is staff has prepared a list of projects. There's been some minor changes in these projects, and these projects, the important part, a couple of things we did is we wanted to make sure that we weren't just randomly picking projects or being kind of dreamy selecting projects. So these projects have all been included in previous master plans and analyses and study, and there's been some identified need for these projects inside the city. And so that was one comb, if you will, we used method that we used to limit some projects. These are all projects that we think have a well-defined scope of services that can be completed, expediently, because as the tax is received for projects that are approved, we want to try and deploy those tax dollars to put these projects into place. And so one of a recommendation, I guess, from staff would be, we believe there's some benefit in seeing what the electorate is supportive of to select a broad slate of projects. You could do projects that were all recreation or projects that were all the brick and mortar. And from a staff perspective, we think there's some value to having a broad slate of projects to see what the temperature is, or the temperament of the voting electorate. One of our challenges tonight is that ultimately we have to have a ballot question to the county clerk by July 18th. And so tonight we need to hopefully identify this list of projects. Now the estimated revenue is $35 million. you'll see up on the screen, we have here a spreadsheet that Pete Myers helped us put together, that as we choose projects to be on there, it'll automatically total those projects for us. So we can look at these as we go along. But that deadline on July 18th, how that backs up is we select the projects tonight. And then between tomorrow and July 3rd, staff and works together to develop the ballot initiative and presents that to the county clerk. Make sure that that's an acceptable from the county clerk. And then on July 12th, we would submit that ballot question back to staff or back to council. And then on July 16th, council would review and approve the ballot initiative and pass a resolution of approval. So you can see it's a fairly congested schedule between now and July 18th. And so at this point, Mr. Mayor, I guess I would turn it over to the council for a discussion on which projects they would like to see included and excluded. And I apologize. I missed one project. We had a project that came in late from the Platte River Trails. And it's for the McKenzie Lake Pathway. And the McKenzie Lake Pathway is a 1 mile loop that's by McKenzie Lake. And so the project is a concrete pathway. The estimated price of that, they provided an engineer's estimate later today, is $825,000. So that project isn't on there. So we just have to keep in mind if council chooses to put that project on there, we'll need to update our spreadsheet to make sure we add that. And that, again, the cost estimate for that project is $825,000. And that's for design and construction of that 1 mile McKenzie Lake loop.
Thank you. Something I would like to start off with, and I think it's best to see if we can find some consensus right off the bat on some. And by that, I mean, how many are in favor of leaving Metro Animal on this list? Okay, there's a yes on Metro Animal. So that's kind of what I was looking for from that aspect. I know Mr. Brower just brought up about the McKenzie Animal Park Trail. In a discussion earlier today that we had, he mentioned, however, that that is one of our next sections of river restoration in there, along with we need to do some remediation on our landfill due to the leachate, which is just to the south, I'm sorry, the north of McKenzie Lake. And so one of his concerns, which I have a tendency to agree with, is that we hate to go ahead and put that on there and spend the money to put the trail in around the lake and then turn around and start running equipment, i.e. track hose, etc., over that trail to do river restoration plus any leachate remediation that we have to do. So I guess I would wonder, from that standpoint, would we be better off to postpone that and put it on as part of the next 5th cent cycle instead of building the new street and immediately going out and digging up to put sewer in it? So kind of along those ideas of philosophy. So I would like to see how the rest of council feels about that particular project.
Could I ask a question to the acting city manager? The importance of that aspect. What we're looking at is trying to do that remediation and all those things. What would your thoughts be on that, Tom? Is it critical? It's something that we could push a little bit down.
Mayor, Councilor,
I'm kind of putting you on the spot.
No, Mayor, Councilor, it's when we're doing these river restoration projects, there's a large amount of federal grant funding. If memory serves me correct, it's $8 million for this project. So there's a lot of grant funding available. Now with that grant funding, we have to do a lot of environmental assessments and look at this property very closely. In this particular area, it's directly down gradient from the old landfill. And there's some very minor signs, and there's some phyto remediation and some other ideas or concepts that have been shared there.
Okay.
So when I think about this McKenzie Lake area, I think, okay, we got to do all the environmental work. I need to make sure I look at what's taking place from the old landfill site. And then we have the river restoration work, which includes a lot of work within the river and within the banks of the river. And that also includes revegetation and tree plantings and all of that work. And then from there, then we're ready to look at, all right, based upon a river restoration, what does the master plan for pathways look like? I absolutely believe that this is a wonderful place for a pathway. I believe it's a great place for a pathway. Personally, my concern is that I would hate to be too aggressive in constructing this pathway until we've done the environmental work, the landfill work, the river restoration work, and the master planning work.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Mayor,
And as a follow-up to Councilor Pacheco, I wasn't saying this is a bad project. I was trying to reiterate.
Gosh, yeah, I didn't take it that way at all.
Oh, very good. I just wanted to make sure that, no, it was basically which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And
No,
we
that's
don't want to
exact-
spend money and then waste it and tear it up. So
No, it's a good clarification. You gave me.
you bet.
Yep.
Very good. I believe Mr. Councilor Bond.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask a kind of a process question if I could. And Tom, I don't know if this is, putting you on the spot or too premature, but you mentioned, kind of gauging the temperament of the voters in terms of these projects. Are you kind of referring to, I had this question kind of in my mind before, are we thinking about like some preliminary survey prior to the November ballot, kind of gauge that kind of where kind of the projects people would be leaning toward, or what are you referring to there?
Mayor,
Yeah.
might take a stab at it. Counselor, I just don't think that the timeline would permit us to do that. So
Yeah.
the ballot language has to be approved to the county clerk by July 18th. So I think, not to put words in Mr. Brower's mouth, but I think the voters in
Yeah.
November will give us a sense of
Okay.
what the priorities are.
Okay.
I think that's, we've got to make that determination, what to put on the ballot.
And in the meantime, we would get input, obviously, from voters about, emails or public comment or about the list, probably.
I would imagine,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Because I imagine that list would be pretty broadly published before we have to make that final.
Or will be
decision.
set.
Yeah.
Before we have to make which?
Well, between now and July 18th, when that final language has.
Well, we have to make the final decision on projects tonight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll make sure everybody understood that.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Councilor Gamroth, you had a comment.
Did two, you might.
Two. Well, you never have one.
My first one, before we get too deep into exactly which projects to support, I guess I personally am still feeling like my curiosity was not satiated. I know it got brought up the last time we had this discussion, but I've continued to hear from folks about this idea that, and I don't know if the city attorney or someone else might be able to help shed some light, but I've heard from folks in Mills primarily, but other surrounding municipalities that their mail, because we share zip codes with them, often they get misidentified as living in Casper when they actually live in Mills or surrounding municipality. And so I really want, before we start planning on which projects we want, I really want to just make sure to put that issue to bed. And in regards to if people are buying things online and they live in the city of Mills, but they have a zip code that also goes into Casper municipal limits, are they responsible for that extra 1% tax? I would just love clarification or confirmation on that specific question first.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilor, that is a question we've heard. I can tell you that staff did reach out to the Wyoming Department of Revenue with this very question. I think the statute is very clear. This is a municipal wide tax, and that means it would be levied on any sales that are occurring within the municipal boundaries of the city of Casper. Jill Johnson, our finance director, did contact the Department of Revenue with the zip code question. They said absolutely not. That is not how it is levied. It's within the confines of any transaction. It's the point of sale, essentially. So if that point of sale is within the municipal boundary of Casper, then it would be subject to the tax. The zip code would not weigh into that. I think from what I've just heard anecdotally, I think some of the concern is, whether or not the State Department of Revenue can adequately implement the statutes and the laws as they're written. I can't speak to that, but I don't believe that legally that zip code argument is correct.
Thank you. So to clarify that, if I live in Mills and I'm purchasing candy from Donnell's Candy online through their online portal, because that point of sale is occurring within, Donnell's is within Casper municipal limits, that would be levied in that case. But if I'm ordering something from Amazon, it would, the statewide 5% tax would be applied in that circumstance because Amazon headquarters is not in our municipal boundaries.
Right, it would be the statewide 4%, right?
4%.
Yeah, but that, I believe that's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
That is, and to follow up, that is exactly what, and I believe we gave a copy of some of that correspondence to the county commissioners, didn't we? That we had received from the Department of Revenue. So we could possibly get a copy of that, I would think.
I would love to see that and know that, 100% that that's.
Well, as the city attorney said, the Department of Revenue said, yes, they can do it. They do it. Now, do you believe that they can actually accomplish that fact? That was one of the concerns within one of the county commissioners because of the snafu with Solvay when we got their tax money and we had to repay $7.5 million back to them. A year or so ago, the same thing happened to a different entity and Midwest had to pay back a couple of $1 million. So there have been some snafus in the Department of Revenue. Now, my comment to them was, and to the commissioners, that if these things start to happen, we need to know about it so that we can correct that situation. But to stop this, because what may happen with another entity within our government, I think is going beyond our bounds. But by the same token, I think we do owe it to the rest of the outlying Casper zip code people to try to rectify this situation if they start having issues with it. I don't want to stop something on a what if. We need to solve the problem. Is that a reasonable assessment?
Mayor, I think that's reasonable. I was just trying to ascertain, I was not at the county commission meeting, but I believe there may have been some correspondence provided with city manager Napier not present. I could follow up on that. And if there are such materials, we'll be sure to.
I thought the city manager had actually received a letter from the DOR stating that in writing that had been passed on to the county commission. So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'd love to see it. And I just think that'll be a critical component of the education piece of, explaining to people the intricacies of this. So my second comment, in regards to Councilor Bond, you had mentioned about surveying people and getting an understanding of what they might be more supportive of. I guess my personal preference is that we focus more. I don't know what your guys' experiences have been in the couple of weeks since this first came up, but I've had multiple people grab my arm and say, I really think that this needs to focus on kind of our core infrastructure, our primary duties, because most of the criticism we get about our 1 cent allocation, which I still believe is informed by the surveys, is that it's the nonprofit allocations or it's the wants versus the needs. And so our 1 cent survey that we did several years ago, the top 4 are streets, water, sewer, fire and EMS and police. And so I guess my personal preference, relying on the survey that we did in regards to the 1 cent, and my guess is public sentiment is pretty broadly applied to the 6 cent, is I would really like to see us focus like Metro. I'm glad to hear that's unanimous. Fire station would be top priority for me, potentially dispatch. I personally would like to see us handle that capital stuff, not only because some of those are the most pressing needs. My understanding is that fire station number 1 is held together by duct tape essentially at this point. And so I'd like to get through all of those kind of core capital needs, those actual needs, and then like parks and river restoration and stuff. I would love to see that all happen personally, but I would love to see that wait for a potential second or third 6 cent cycle, and give people that ability to vote on those a la carte so that they can help guide our decisions. And that I would actually also advocate, if I'm still on council next time we allocate the 5th cent, I would like to get more streets funding from the 1 cent. I'd like to refocus that towards strictly capital so that there is no dispute that that is strictly for capital. And then some of the other stuff could potentially go on a 6 cent ballot. And so that's just my personal preference. And I hope that's the direction we go this evening. Again, just relying on the survey that we have for the 5th cent street, water, sewer, fire and EMS and police being by and large top priorities from the people.
Casper.
I'm going to disagree with
Okay, fair enough.
you. We've already decided that the 5th cent is already designated for infrastructure. And so we've been doing that since the 70s. This is something completely different. And so this is, I think that we need to structure this completely different than what we're already doing. So we can't do a sheet of ice or adding on to the rec center or the Hogadon Metro. Metro would be the only one that I would think. I think that the fire station needs to go under the 5th cent because it is infrastructure and we've already set the precedents building fire stations through our 5th cent. And so I believe that the fire station should probably be removed off of this and then use the 5th cent funding for that and then utilize the 6th cent for other things that the city just cannot afford to do.
I'm just gonna say I agree with Lisa.
You done?
Mhm.
Okay. And
I'm done.
I don't know.
I can go all night.
I didn't know if you had a follow-up or not. I'm getting too used to Kyle always
Keep
saying
it
something
going.
more.
Keep going if you want.
So, Councilor Pollock.
Thank you. Yeah, I think, these two taxes are fundamentally different in statute. They're structured differently. They have different mechanisms that are used. And so I think we need to philosophically start to help the two types of taxes diverge. I think that we have, historically, 5th cent, has evolved in terms of what we have allocated those fundings for. So I think that, right now, because we've never had the 6th cent, you see some projects that maybe are better suited for 6th cent in the 5th cent pot at this moment. And I think that as we, continue to provide opportunity to consider 6th cent, we need to differentiate them philosophically. I think they are not really infrastructure specific. I think that, in my mind, this is the perfect spot for amenities, particularly when we're giving the voters a menu of options. I think on the 5th cent, what we're asking for is, here's a big pot of money for all the various infrastructure needs we might have. And we give some ideas, right? But it's much less specific than this. These are specific one-time projects. And I think we need to be careful and continue to move in a direction where we're differentiating between the two types of tax and the two, the different types of projects and where they land. Otherwise, we're just asking for the 5th cent twice, basically, which I don't think is appropriate. So I think, my preference would, I think to Kyle's point, I think what I would like to see happen is moving some of those amenities out of 5th cent pocket, creating more infrastructure money in 5th cent, future 5th cent allocations, and putting more of those questions to a 6th cent ballot if we feel like we can, do the education, start to prove a good track record of getting some of these projects done, start to prove that the tax can go away if the voters want it to go away, and build some of that, some of that track record with the community to say, like, you voted for 6th cent, this was the project you voted for, here it is, now the community can enjoy it. Then I think, if we can move in that direction, then we've got opportunity to move some of those projects that maybe are more amenity specific into the 6th cent. But I really think we have to differentiate, or else every time we ask for the 5th cent, it's going to be a whole mess of, well, we already voted for that 2 years ago. And it's like, well, that was 6th cent. And I think we've really got to be careful that we start to kind of lay some groundwork for boundaries. And I acknowledge the fact that there is some overlap and some gray area and some blurring of the lines currently in how we allocate 5th cent. But I think moving in a direction where it's more clear will serve us well in future asks in 5th cent and 6th cent.
Counselor Pacheco.
Yeah, I think both Lisa and Amber both hit the nail on the head. I feel the same way very strongly around that and separate those two. I think a lot of the amenities that we're looking at here are beneficial to the community economically. I think they could attract like the second sheet of ice. Lots of stuff, the fast pitch, a lot of things that can happen. And I think we need to focus on those types of things when we say the special purpose tax. You look at Cheyenne does those types of things. They don't focus in on infrastructure per se for the city. They don't focus in on streets with 6 cent, but their special purpose tax. I think this is smart. I think it's pragmatic to go and allow the community to say, okay, no, hey, second sheet of ice, absolutely, this would be great. Bring in tournaments, it would do this, it would do this. And chairlift has been needed, something that people utilize here in Casper and the county even. So I think that's the direction we need to go. And I agree with Amber, we need to keep those two separate with some gray area, but I think we need to keep it separate. In that mind, that's going to kind of what I'm going to base my decisions off of which ones will be moved to the 5th cent and ones that will stay underneath our 6 cent. So that's my take.
Counselor Jensen.
Cool. All right, along the same thread of what we're doing, I'm gonna talk about the 911 dispatch center too on there. There's things in there that I don't think that the 6 cents should pay for, but I would say no to the renovations and the relocation. I don't think that tax should pay for any of that, but the tax could maybe potentially be useful for upgrades in the technology part. Not moving, not revamping the place, but the upgrades.
Counselor.
Go ahead, Jack
Oh,
first.
okay. Ooh, we'll skip you for a minute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I am kind of trying to wrap my head around the different, I get the strategic differentiation and I think it makes sense. And also the nature of taxpayers getting to choose this already differentiates it. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand a little bit more about, I mean, what goes in and what goes out. But my comment, I guess, is specifically with the fire station. I mean, it's a big budget item on here. And my question is, what if we do not include it on this? What does it mean time-wise for the next opportunity we might have to fund that project? Because it does seem like it's really important. And I don't know who can answer that question.
Mayor, Counselor,
We may have the exact person sitting.
Yeah.
we could give it a shot,
Okay, thank
you
you.
know, absolutely. There's grant fundings we're pursuing from
Okay,
a federal level and even from a local level.
okay,
The state right now has, I don't know if it applied to a fire station, but $34 million in grant funding that's available for infrastructure improvements. I'm not sure. It's been several years, but the State Land and Investment Board, through the State Land Investment Mineral Royalties Grant, they've funded fire stations and hospitals in the past. And so, and ultimately, I think the 5th cent. You know, I can tell you from a standpoint of, again, Ms. Lopez's department, buildings and structures, we put a lot of maintenance into that fire station recently. You know, and so we've done a good job of keeping that, you know, there's not a porta potty outside or anything like that. We kept the place running and it's operational. And there's still decisions to make on the fire station as well. The exact location of that and the land acquisition. So if it isn't included in here, believe me, staff and the fire station folks as well, we're going to be searching for every grant fund available and be trying to queue up the 5th cent sales tax to help fund that like it paid for the previous stations.
thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Counselor Bond.
Eric, do you happen to have the, thank you, Mayor. Do you happen to have the exact language of the statute around 6 cent? Again, I know we've read it before, but I think for me, that would be helpful in helping weigh these projects if we could. A little indulgence for that.
Yeah, Mayor, Counselor, I do, it's fairly lengthy, so I'll try to maybe just read the
Yeah.
parts that are pertinent. So, in 39-15-203, Roman at 6, the following provisions apply to the imposition of the municipal tax. Let's see here. So, as I previously advised, if the county had imposed a 5 cent and a specific use tax, then we would not need to go to the county commissioners for their permission. However, since the Natrona County only has a 5 cent out of a specific countywide specific use tax, and we can only do it, quote, if the Board of County Commissioners has adopted a resolution by the county under subparagraph J of this paragraph, then a city or town within the county where the tax was imposed may propose an excise tax as provided in this paragraph. And it goes on and on and on. In C, it says revenue from the tax shall be used for general purposes or for a specific purpose in a specified amount as specified in the proposition to impose the tax. A city or town may impose a portion of the tax for separate purposes, provided that the purposes are voted on separately. Each proposition specifies the purpose of the tax, and the total amount of the tax does not exceed the full amount authorized under 204A Roman 7. Jumping down to J, if a county has not imposed taxes as provided in subparagraph B of this paragraph, the Board of County Commissioners may adopt a resolution to authorize cities and towns within the county to propose a municipal tax under this paragraph. The resolution shall establish the maximum taxation rate in increments of 1/4 of 1%, not to exceed a rate of 1%. The proposition by a city or town for a municipal tax authorized under this subparagraph shall specify that the municipal tax shall terminate after 2 years. So just to kind of maybe recap that, we have the ability, because the county commissioners passed a resolution allowing towns and cities. Before you would be a 1% specific use tax. So that has been kind of the discussion. It wouldn't be for general operations. With the added wrinkle, because it's under sub J, that it would terminate in 2 years. And so that I think $36 million figure is the estimated revenue that would be generated over those 2 years.
Yeah.
Mayor, Councilor, I don't know if that
Yeah,
answers your
no,
question.
that helps. What I was looking for, I think I remember reading something about could that be used for general operations, which to me says salaries, you know, that kind of thing. Utilities, but more capital projects is more the intent, correct?
It can be either, but I think that the decision that, to my understanding of this council, has been to do it for specific capital projects.
Right.
And so that is what's before you
Yeah.
would be the menu of those options.
Okay. I guess what I'm just struggling with, kind of separating out a capital project that was better for 5 cent and not for this one. That's where I'm still a little fuzzy.
Anybody else have any?
Let me say what Mayor can say.
He had his hand up before you whispered in my ear. Okay, hang on a minute.
We'll talk.
And I want to say something as well. So we'll start off with Kyle. There, I'll put myself on.
Councilor Pollock's point, I agree. I would like, and you know, I may or may not be on council at this time, and so there's no way for me to help this council or the future council commit to it, but I would like to see the 5 cent really dialed in and you know, all those allocations strictly for core capital, and then the 6 cent gives people autonomy over some of the other more optional, I guess, projects that we take on. I will remind this council that the 6 penny that Cheyenne just recently passed, there was tons of what I would consider core infrastructure that they put in there. 15 million for 3 fire stations, since we were talking about fire stations. So 15 million for 3 fire stations, 13.5 million for fire truck and police truck replacements, fire districts. You know, so I would argue that a ton of their 6 cent went to core infrastructure, streets, public building repairs, cemetery irrigation, and other things that I think common folk would assume would be just regularly budgeted part of a city's regular budget. And so I guess just my concern is that if we have too many projects that are seen as optional or as wants versus needs, we're gonna limit the success of this six that we don't. Since I've been on council, so I'll take part ownership of it. We don't have a great track record. Specific purpose tax failed. Making 5th cent permanent failed. And so I just really feel like we need to do our diligence on this. I guess I must be the only person that's had anyone approach them in public and give thoughts on the 6th cent, or maybe folks have been sharing something different. I would be curious in regards to the notion that we should remove Fire Station 1 out of here. I was looking at how we allocated 1 cent during the last cycle, and I don't see how we would have came up with $17 million out of that budget.
Yeah.
So I would be curious. I don't know if I got some more junior members from city staff that probably weren't around when we built the first the other fire stations. I don't know if Chief could provide context, but I'd be curious what that looked like in the past, us having fire stations on the 1 cent docket. What trade-offs did we have to make? What from the allocations we made during the last cycle would we need to carve out to fit in the 17 million, which is essentially a quarter of the entire expected revenue? I just love some context. I can't find anything online, and I wasn't paying attention at the time. So some of those high dollar capital investments like fire stations, I'd be curious how we made that work with previous allocations, if anyone can help me.
You okay with you?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, yeah, I think Chief can provide some context. I apologize. I remember when those were built. I don't remember the specific conversation of what else the 1 cent went to at that point in time.
I think the chief was probably around then.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, councilors, thank you for having me up to speak about this. This fire replacement project started 13 years ago. Station number 3 was the first one, and that was for $2.74 million.
What?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
It's a lot easier to find 2 than 17.
Yeah, so each fire station was roughly that $3 to $4 million mark. Fire Station 1, when we did the evaluation to replace it back in 2018, would have been $12 million. And here we are at 17.5. So we wait another 6 years or 8 years. I mean, that number is just going to continue to grow and grow and grow. And I would love to be able to fund it through the 5th cent cycles, but I mean, when the fire department gets $3.8 million for a cycle, and we're allocating that to different apparatus and other capital needs, I don't know where we're going to be able to find that type of funding. So if that answers your question.
Reaffirms my existing belief. Thank you, Chief.
For the chief? or-
Yes,
Oh,
please.
okay.
Well, maybe it's a combination strategic question for comment, Chief. So in my last question, just trying to understand the nature of funding options available, because I agree that getting Fire Station 1 rebuilt is a major priority. I feel like I heard that maybe it might be preemptive at this point because there are some strategic decisions based on where it could be located. And so I guess I'm just trying to understand, for me personally, in considering the range of options here, I don't want to put anything on this that it's not the right time for it, but I also don't want to undermine our strategic objective to rebuild Fire Station 1. So I'm just trying to understand 2 questions. 1, are we ready? And 2, if we're not, how likely are these funds, like these grant opportunities outside of 6th cent, to how likely are we to win grant money? I mean, I know there's the crystal ball gazing, but is there anything that you can share that helps me understand, I guess, those 2 questions?
Mr. Mayor, councilors, 1, yes, we're very ready.
Okay.
We have different parcels of land identified. We have engineering design firms ready to go. And for the second part of the question, we did apply for a community block grant in the amount of $2 million that it is earmarked for us, but that adds to that 17.5 and hits about a $19.5 million budget to cover the build out of land, engineering and design. And so as far as more funding through that committee of block program, I would not bet that we can get another 17.5 out of it. I don't know that for sure, but their cap on it this time was $2 million. So as far as future avenues to pursue that, I can't just speak to that. And a lot of the federal grants out there for fire departments does not go towards fire stations and building structures, stuff like that. So as far as the state land board, I'm not sure what that type of funding can do and if that's even a possibility. But I do know a lot of the federal grants as far as through FEMA, that does not go to fire stations or fire buildings.
If I recall, basically the FEMA is for personnel, isn't it?
Well,
Excuse me.
apparatus, equipment,
Yes.
things like that.
Thank you.
Can I just offer some thoughts then in response to that?
You've got the floor right now.
Okay, thank you. So for me, given that, I mean, I think that it could easily be argued that Metro's in a similar situation as fire station, and we're all in agreement that that's a core need and we're putting that on this. And so I actually would advocate for the fire station to be on the 6 cent. I think it's important. I feel like our fire department needs it. That's been expressed for many years. I think our community strongly supports our fire station, our fire department, and our firefighters. And for me, it's an important strategic need for our community. And just like Metro, it's a deficiency that we need to rectify. And so I support putting that on there, and I know that means other things need to come off. But I think if we can put forward a ballot that is a balanced and a blend of things that are going to provide great economic development opportunities, great recreational opportunities, as well as meeting some of our core city functions and the needs of our city departments, I actually feel like that's a really strong and balanced ballot that hopefully will bring our community out to vote and make their voices heard on that. So I would advocate for fire station number 1 to stay on the ballot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any more questions?
I was gonna say, any more questions for the chief? Okay, thank you, chief. Appreciate the perspective.
I forgot what I was gonna say. Let me see if I can punt.
I can go to Amber and then come back.
Yeah, why don't you do that? 'Cause I think I know. Sorry, Amber, you know what you want to
I'm
say.
ready.
Okay. Sorry, I've been processing like 20 different things. Go ahead.
You're not that old to be
I
forgetting.
know.
That's my job.
So I agree. I mean, as I've been considering this, I've mostly been concerning myself with the mix because I think that it's important to provide, if we're gonna provide options, I want to provide options for people and I want to have a variety on there, so that we do get a sense of, you know, what the right balance is and what the sentiment is and, you know, how people want to see this money being used. And that's a big reason why I've been shying away from Fire Station 1 is it takes up 50% of this tax. So to me, that's putting a lot of eggs in that basket. We're banking on half of this potential tax revenue on one project that may or may not have the public support. So to me, that feels risky. It feels like, you know, if that doesn't have the support that we think, we've left potentially a fair amount of our potential revenue raise on the table. And so I get very nervous about putting a project that large at all. I mean, sort of regardless of what it was. To me, this is a relative, it's not a small amount of money, but it's a smaller amount of money than 5th Sense. And so it's a little bit better suited for smaller bites. And Fire Station 1 is is a big fight, no matter what mechanism you're talking about, no matter what budget you're talking about, that's a huge fight. So it feels a little heavy-handed for a tax of this size to me. And I feel like we, you know, I don't know. I don't know if it's, you know, a risk worth taking, or if it's, you know, we end up leaving a lot on the table because we're trying to take such a big bite out of such a small pot of money. So I'm not sold on it, this being the place for it. I recognize the continued struggle to find the money for it. But I do think, well, I want to know how Cheyenne's building 3 fire stations for 15 million out of their 6 cent, because I have a hard time believing that. But you know, maybe that's just partial funding or something. But I, you know, to me, we've relied on 5 cent for fire station funding in the past. It seems a more appropriate spot for it to me based on the size of the pool. It will be a big lift in the next 15 or the next 5 cent cycle. So again, that's where I think a lot of the things that maybe we have historically funded with 5 cent need to transition to 6 cent asks. You know, some of these things in an optional tax, some of these things, if people vote no, we could simply just not do that project. On Fire Station 1, if they vote no, we still have to find the money for it. So to me, that's where I start to make that distinction too, is 6 cents. I agree, Metro to me is falling into that gray area. It's because it's, you know, basically an emergency at this point. But I think that, you know, I would love to see this become a situation where if people vote no on that, we don't have to find the money somewhere else. We just don't complete that project. And that's just an upgrade or an amenity or a facility that we don't have to do. And I think there are a number of things on there, like, you know, they don't have to get done, but it's great if we can get them done. Fire Station 1 is not, you know, not in alignment with that. And I think it just weighs the whole thing, skews the whole thing in one very specific project, which makes me nervous. And I will reiterate, I said this the last time, I do not think we can justify Fire Station 1 dispatch and Metro, all public safety in one cycle of this. So I think something's gotta drop from that list. Otherwise, that's basically the whole ask is then public safety.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of going back to when Mike said, how do we make the distinguishing? And I think Amber eloquently put that out there. I am 100% behind a new fire station. I just don't think having 50% of it almost going to that is justifiable right now. I think if we look at the smaller bites, the things that we're trying to do, like Amber said, I think it's looking, it's a better opportunity for us to get that. No one on here doesn't doubt that we need a fire station, and will prices keep going up? Absolutely. We committed to it, the new police station to $50-some million. I think this council would be committed, and future councils would be committed to getting that done. But I think we need to turn our attentions toward those types of things. Exactly what Amber said too, that it's 3 public safety things that we're dealing with here. And someone's going to have to look at how we navigate that. $17 million is a big chunk, everyone. That's a big, so we got to take that into account. So.
Just a second, I was on the list.
Go ahead.
Something that I wanted to bring up is that in some previous discussions as well, the number 5, the 911 dispatch center, that 7 million. What it was suggested is to maybe cut that back to 5, which would take care of the equipment. That's about what the equipment was supposed to be, because we've already budgeted for the moving of the equipment, the build out and everything. So if that does play into our future discussions, would we all be okay with reducing that to the 5 instead of leaving it at 7? If it continues in the mix. I'm not saying that's what we're gonna do, but I'm saying that gives us another 2 million someplace else. Are we good with that?
Way, I feel like.
I think we need to kind of look at, okay, looking at that big chunk of the fire station right now, think that's gonna be a big decision on a lot of us, is what I'm thinking. And let me
Okay.
I'll just throw that out there. I just think that's gonna be a big outlier.
Yeah.
Because I think we're seeing, okay, where do we fall on that 17 million? And I hate to put that on the biggest, up on the pedestal right now, that's fire station. But I think that's gonna be a big decision on a lot of us. I'll say that, Mayor.
So that's fine.
I have a question on fire station if you want to go on.
I think Councilor Bond had something.
Sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to.
No, no, you're fine.
No. He
Um,
was supposed to be after me also. You're okay.
so since we're kind of talking about public safety, this vein of public safety projects that are on the potential list here. Just one thing, and this kind of came up the other day, and it's come up as we had the conversation with both the county commissioners and about, this is a Casper tax, that kind of thing. And one of the commissioners actually pointed out that, he could think of some things that were actually, would be managed by the city, would be funded potentially by the 6 cent, but are used by the entire county. So when I look at this list, and 2 of the 3 that we just talked about, the fire station, the dispatch center, and the metro, are used by the entire county. So $14 million in projects on this list are things that are used by the entire county, not just Casper, with the dispatch center and metro. So I just want to throw that out there, that, that's again, potentially another half of this $35 million project. Nearly half is 14 million of projects that are not just Casper. Yeah, but again, we're shouldering the responsibility. So I don't know, I guess I just have a hard time. I'm gonna have a really hard time not going with the fire station. To me, that is like, I agree, Metro is an emergency, but without a functional, facility for our fire protection, I feel negligent. I'll just put that out there.
Since Ray left for a moment, I will defer to Jennifer right now. And then Randy.
Well, I'm just curious, so
Steve, put me on the list.
with what you just stated, yes, fire stations used by the whole county, so
Fire station.
the metro
Yeah.
and all of that. Okay. Never mind. I was gonna say something. I'll hold it.
It's tiny, by the way.
Right. Like, it should stay with this then, but
All of them.
Yeah.
Running through all those things.
Yeah, it's true.
yeah, I had nothing. I was gonna retort, but then I just changed my mind.
Okay,
Better not.
Councilor Haskins.
Okay, so I have a question for all of you guys. What if we tried something like 3 options instead of 75 and say, public safety, such as dispatch and fire, metro, because we all want that no matter what, and then all just pure fun stuff, such as up to this amount. What if we don't make you pick from 10? What if we make you pick from 3? Do you want to use it towards public safety? Do you want to use it towards metro? Do you want to use it towards fund tip? Do you not want to have it at all? Pardon me.
Oh, on the ballot, you mean?
Yes, what if we offer 3 options?
I'm a no on that one, or I can say that pretty flat out. I'll say I'm a no on that one.
Then I go with fund tax.
Amenity.
Amenities. Let's say amenities.
Okay,
Thanks, Brandon.
Amber.
Okay, well, while we're talking about, potentially looking at a partial funding of the dispatch description that's on there, are there any bites out of the fire station, one that we could take that would move it 1 spot further down the goalpost that we could put on that are not 17.5 million? I know design hasn't been done, and we've talked about, do we really want to put something like design on the ballot? Because it's not that fund to fund a design that may or may not get built, in your lifetime. But is there a design plus maybe that could be considered?
As a follow-up to that, I'm gonna cut to our COO for a minute.
Mayor, Counselor, at this point, if you ask me to pick that number, I'd really struggle to pick that number. And, I struggled when we were conceptually, when we were looking at these numbers, because that is such a big number. We can't build half a fire station. Doesn't work very well. And we certainly don't want to just put a foundation in the ground and say, well, when we get some more money, we'll add them into this and build it a piece at a time. And I do think there is an option in there, especially when we look at two primary components: land acquisition and design. I don't have that number committed to memory right now, but again, it's probably 20% of that number in round numbers. So $3,000 in round numbers, or $3 million. I wish it was 3,000. Excuse me, $3 million. That's just, we could finalize that number, but that is one way that you could look at helping to fund the fire station. The challenge then is we get the design complete. We don't like to pay for designs that we just sit on the shelf, and we want to keep moving it forward. And so we'd have to very aggressively pursue other funding sources. Now that could be a 6 cent 2 years from now, could be the 5th cent 2 years from now. Memory serves me correct, that's when it's up. So I think that is one option for that. Well, I think it is interesting because my direction in talking to Carter was trying to set up a ballot initiative that was broad, that had a broad selection of choices. I think it's interesting if we take the two that are most critical, the one that's already got a yes by it, and the fire station, we're at almost three quarters of this $35 million. And I think it's fascinating because ultimately, I appreciated when Eric brought this up, that the ultimate poll on this tax is going to be November 5th. And I think it's going to hopefully change the course of the city of Casper for time to come when we find out what are the projects that did get a breadth of support. And then, that helps us reframe how do we do this in the coming years when we put this tax together in the future. And so personally, from the standpoint of trying to get that poll on November 5th, I struggle with 3/4 of the tax going towards public safety. And because I don't think we get a very accurate polling of what the voting public are looking for. I will tell you, we could follow it up with, potentially a design number for the fire station if we chose to put that in there. And as an alternative to the big number that it is, $17.5 million.
Design and land, or?
Mayor, Councilor, yes, that was what I would want to do, is make sure that we've got enough money in there, because I think land acquisition doesn't happen really expediently in some cases. And so I think it's important to try to capture that and move forward with the design process and the land. And the design is going to be dictated by the land, at least the site plan.
I noticed you stood up, Chief. Did you have something that you would like to throw into this conversation? I hope that's okay.
Yeah, it's just.
So I do have a pretty, I do have a pretty solid number on the design. It's about 1.2 million. And then land is estimated 1 to 2 million. So you were pretty spot on land design around 3 million.
Said 1.5.
1.2 for the design piece.
So we're talking about 3.2 for land design and land acquisition. Okay, thank you.
What was that breakdown again?
So roughly 1.2 for the design, and then 1 to 2 million for the
So if it's 3 million, you could say essentially the cost of building is 14 million. So you could
Well-
choose to take that, or you could put the construction of fire station one on the ballot. But I mean, it's still a big chunk, but.
And we put 17.5 on there because we're counting on that 2 million from the community block grant, because overall with all land, building, design, about 19.5.
Okay,
And that was cut down from 27 million to do the fire station and admin together. So, yeah, which in 2018, we could have done both of them for 14 million.
yeah, wow. Things just keep going up exponentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, chief.
Any other questions?
For the chief? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chief. I mean, just, before I ask my question, you just remarked that we could have done all of this for 14 million a couple years ago. That's my concern right now is if we punt it, it's not gonna be 17 and a half, it's gonna be 21 and a half to either this council or the future council. I just do not want to kick that can anymore. I was looking up at City of Cheyenne and they did, their 6 penny, their expectation was that they could rebuild 2 fire stations and build a entirely new one for about 5 million each. Could you speak to what makes Fire Station 1 remarkable in regards to the ones in Cheyenne, but also the ones we've previously built recently? What about Fire Station 1, other than just inflation and other kind of economic pressures? Is there something different about Fire Station 1 that makes it unique?
Mr. Mayor, councilors, Station 1 is the heart of our fire department. It's the biggest station. It houses the most people, the most apparatus. It protects this downtown area, all the high rises. They started with the small fire stations. That's why they were only $2, $3, $4 million a piece. Same thing with the Cheyenne fire stations. Those are smaller fire stations that only house 3 to 4 people at a time. Fire Station 1, I mean, we need to house up to 18 people at a time. And we've got the battalion chief, engine, truck, rescue. We're being forced in to explore different response models. That's why we're increasing staffing, because we can't take care of our call volume. Station 1 isn't a multi-gender facility. It's big open style dorm rooms, piecemealed together. It hasn't been built with all the safety measures and the decon measures to keep us clean and keep the station clean. There's a lot of cross-contamination factors that are involved. That's the biggest station. It would have been smart to start with that station and then do all the small ones afterwards. But I can't armchair quarterback that. That's just the way it started. So.
Part of you made the comment about the staffing. Right now, we don't staff that to be able to run all trucks out of there, do we? R1, T1, E1 plus.
We have the battalion, engine 1, rescue 1, truck 1 over there right now.
Right.
We cross staff the truck and rescue.
That's what I was getting at, is that if you needed to have R1, T1 and E1, all 3 on the same scene, you don't have the personnel at Station 1 to be able to drive all 3 out of there and man them simultaneously.
Some days we do, depending on when people are sick.
Okay.
Once we get up to our staffing model, they will be fully staffed. And when that happens, that station is overloaded.
That's
all sorts of stuff.
That was my whole point. Thank you. I may have misstated that, but that's what I was trying to get at, is that we really don't have the room even for the personnel to be able to staff all of the equipment that we're trying to house in that station.
Correct.
Thank you. That's where I was trying to get. I said it poorly. Jai.
This is not directly for you, but it's kind of about you, so you're welcome to see it there. But I'd like to suggest that we take the design and land out of the 6th cent and that we keep 14 on there.
Sorry.
Go ahead, please.
And we basically did do that.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be 19.5.
Okay.
And I'm planning on that 2 million coming through
For design.
Right.
for the design and at least $1 million towards the.
So then okay, thank you for that. And when we asked about piecemealing it down, we were told 1.2 and 2, like for the land. So I guess our answers are conflicting for me too.
So, yeah, so the estimates for land are 1 to 2 million.
Yes, okay.
And we can't we can't nail that down until we actually say, this is the piece of land, we're gonna buy it. And we don't want to air which piece of land it is, because
Right.
then possibly
Yeah.
it can
And it's no
inflate.
longer.
But we do know for sure that the engineering design is roughly 1.2 million.
Okay,
And so with that 2 million that we get from the community block grant that I just applied for, that'll at least cover $1 million for the land and $1 million for the engineering and design.
okay, and everything else, so the full 17.5 would go to construction.
100%.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, all right, well, I will rescind that suggestion then, but, I would still advocate for Fire Station 1 to be on the ballot, and I would not support the dispatch, any portion of that. From my perspective, because I do think we have to weigh our public safety allocations.
Vice Mayor.
Going to Washington DC and talking with all the legislatures and everything, the one thing that I know, and I know that the chief will confirm this, there are a lot of grants and money available for the fire department on the federal level and then some on the state, whereas on the police side of things, there's none. And so we could get him all sorts of grants and things, not necessarily definite 100%, but he has a lot more opportunity with federal grants than what the police chief does. And to receive some types of grants. And so I feel like if it wasn't on the ballot, then we could probably find grants, get the loans, whatever we're needing to do easier for Chief Black than McPeters. Can I respond to that? I feel like I heard that, and I also feel like I heard that there are a lot of grants available, but not for the construction of a physical building. So I think there's a distinction there. The other thing is that we know that there has been pushback already on how much money is being spent on the police station. And to me, I think I just feel strongly that we need to support our fire department on this measure. And I think that putting dispatch on there could potentially harm the success of the 6 Cent initiative, to be totally honest.
You said putting it on there would harm it?
I think it could.
Okay. I have a question. Well, basically, you're saying you can get grants that would fund the 3.2 million for design and land acquisition.
I'm hoping for 2 million.
Okay, so that isn't a guarantee yet.
It's earmarked, but it has to pass through Congress for those funds to be released and then awarded.
Okay. I guess what I would wonder about and make a suggestion for is to go ahead, because we're due for the 5th cent in 2 years. I am guessing it will take what, a year to 18 months at least for the design and land acquisition?
Yeah, it's, Mr. Mayor, yes, I'd say that's probably.
And I'm just pulling that out of the air, but that's kind of what I was looking at is, so what would happen if we would cut this from the 17 down to say 5 for all of the design, land acquisition, ancillary things that would go along with getting ready to put a bucket in the ground for the 6 cent, and then go ahead and put the remainder of the actual construction into the next 5th cent cycle, which is where you've been talking about that we ought to be putting potentially the fire stations, because that's where we've always put them. Is there any appetite for that as opposed to yay or nay on 17?
Mayor, I think if the chief is, I know it's earmarked and we're still waiting through Congress, but we have grants towards that already. I think that that's a good shot for us. And I think it'd be hard for us to say, well, we need the 5 million for this, but if we've got this in the pike, even if we have to look at doing $1 million to help with that down the road, I think we need to kind of stay focused in on whether we do the whole thing now will be doing. That's kind of my thought. I'm gonna wait for that earmark. That's my theory.
Mr. Mayor, council, and I haven't been directly involved, but I was involved in procuring the earmark for the
Okay.
new public health facility. And so it does have to yet be approved, and then the federal budget has to be approved by Congress for it to become effective. So the earliest would be this fall. We know that sometimes gets kicked down the road, so then that takes a little more time, assuming that is reasonably in the near future approved. I can tell you that the experience with Anna Kinder at Public Health is it's been a very slow moving process. And so I don't know, Chief, if that earmark is specifically for design and land acquisition, or if it's for the broader overall project. But I guess my takeaway is that, you know, you are probably looking at a year to year and a half until you can even put those funds
To use.
to use.
It was specifically for land acquisition and design.
Okay. Any other questions for the chief?
Not a question, but a comment then. Then I think this is too premature. If we can't even start design or land acquisition for another 18 months until 12 to 18 months until we, the federal government. I mean, we probably won't even be breaking ground on this project within the 2-year window. Not that we have to have it done, but I do think there is something to be said for, like, we need these projects to get done so that it's a clear evidence of, like, what did your 6 cent buy you? It bought you these things that are very clear. So to me, we're looking at 5th cent cycle anyway for this one, just based on the time frame alone. If it's specifically for design, and because that has to happen first, obviously, design and land acquisition. So we can't start that process for another year. That pushes it.
You are correct. I would say you are correct with that. Is that we're looking at 25 to start design and land acquisition. And so you're looking at 27 before you would be ready to put a shovel in the ground. And we're looking at 26 for the 5th cent.
Yeah.
So
And I know, like, a 2-year, I don't think it's a reasonable expectation that every project can get done in 2 years. I think that's really aggressive, but I also think we are really trying to build some community support and momentum around the idea that if you approve some of these projects, you have something to show for that effort. And so to me, it's like, if we've got some projects that are sort of lingering around, waiting on the federal government, right, waiting on other grants, like that's precarious to me.
well,
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilor Pollock. We need to have deliverables. We need to have something to show for it. Otherwise, we're putting any future ballot initiatives at risk. I would just be curious to know if the chief agreed with the assumptions that we're making about timelines and the order of events. We're working with correct assumptions.
Mr. Mayor, Councilor, I do believe, say this goes to the ballot in November, public votes for it, it's a go. We bond with the contractor and start the process right away. And I mean, it's gonna take a long time for all that to collect the funds and everything else. But the sooner we bond and get that project going, the sooner we're locked in and we're not fighting another 10% a year and fighting that inflation that continues to grow into what this has already turned into.
yeah,
I know our 5th cent, there's a 1-year lag time between when the revenue is generated and when we can expend it. Would it be the same for the 6th cent as well? So we start collection next year, but we don't start expending any money until the following year. Is that a correct assumption?
Mr. Mayor, Council, I think it is collected in the same manner as the 5th cent. And so I'm not intimately familiar with the lag in the process, but I do think it's fundamentally the same. And, you know, I guess the question would be is on some of these, you know, are there funds readily available that can be moved over and then backfilled? I mean, these are all finance questions without Ms. Johnson here and Carter. I'm not sure that we can fully answer them, but so there's a lot of variables.
Mayor, Councilor, and I have some concerns because there's a couple different delivery methods on this fire station. we can do a conventional design bid build, or we can do a construction manager at risk. In either situation, I don't see us hiring a building contractor until that design is at least 30% complete. That would be a construction manager at risk. So in order to do that, we have to acquire the land first until we can build, because we don't know exactly what we're going to build for a fire station until we know the parcel of land that it's going to go on. So we have to acquire the land, and we have to complete the design, at least get it started before we'd ever put a building contractor under any kind of contract. And so I struggle with that timing there. While I'm sharing this with you, the attorney look up these fire station, one of the fire stations in Cheyenne. The cost estimate is from 2019. The cost estimate is $429 a square foot. In my opinion, the cost estimate is at least half of what it should be. To police station down in Douglas, $900 a square foot, round numbers. The interesting thing to keep in mind about inflation, there's two things to really remember. From 2019 to 2023, even 2024, costs jumped 70%. 70, and just unheard of, and that's housing, but definitely on commercial real estate, on building material costs, so that's 70%. Since that point, inflation on building materials has been outpacing the number that we see on CNBC or whatever, 3.4%, 3.5. Inflation on construction materials has been outpacing it almost 2 to 1. Right now, the inflation is about at 6%. Now, that's nowhere near what we saw during COVID, 2019 to 2023, 24, but it is still very significant. So the fascinating thing with time value of money is that you realize at the same point, we also have money invested, and we're seeing returns on investments. And so that's the interesting part when you're chasing expenses going higher, but the value of the dollar is also going higher too. The value of the goods we're buying and are going higher. The challenging part our legislature has been dealing with, which is property tax, because those prices went up by 70% during COVID. So that's everybody's screaming about their property taxes because of building material increases. So it's important to keep in mind some of these inflationary numbers when we're dealing with this. We are dealing in an aggressive inflationary period right now, but this is nowhere near what we went through during COVID when we saw that 70% increase in those 3 to 4 years.
So this is a question for either Tom or the chief. How much is the land acquisition possible? What's the idea? About $1 million, a little over $1 million?
1 to 2 million, unless we find something that is less than that.
So if we crossed our fingers and said, okay, look, we're going to get the earmark, we're going to do that, but we could put on the 6 cent, the acquisition for the land, which would be $2 million. Would that be helpful? I know it's not getting us nearer to the 17 million, but it would get us started if we could do that. I don't know if that's something council could stomach, or if the chief, how you feel. I know you you want that 17. Would that be helpful to some extent at all? I mean, I know the answer is probably yes, Ray, it would be, but it's not that helpful.
First, it'd be helpful. And then we just have to balance through when we get those earmarks, if we get them, and make sure it's all allocated correctly.
Okay. It was just a suggestion. I thought I'd throw that out there to see.
Okay, I think we're done with all the questions. Thank you, Chief, for everything that you brought up.
Thanks, Chief.
Is there any stomach for, before we go to all or none, is there any stomach for putting in the amount for the land and design, which would be roughly 3.2 million? Versus the, do what?
I think you should start with all or none first.
Okay.
Just because if we get a majority, then the conversation's over.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many here are for all 17 million?
As long as the timelines, I guess I'm still.
17 million.
You don't have to do this.
For the fire station?
Yes. We're voting for the fire station. Who's in for 17 million for the fire station? Okay. Who's in for nothing for the fire station? Okay, now. It looks like. That got us a long ways.
Got us somewhere.
So it looks like we're not, go ahead, Kyle.
I mean, I just have 2 cents because it seems like the conversation was pivoting around this idea that if we don't fund it in its entirety with a special 6 cent, that we could use the next 5 cent to do it. Half of us are up for, over half of us, the majority of us, 5 seats are up for election this year. And so not that we can commit future councils to anything anyways, but also this council makeup could change drastically. And so whatever plans we might have for a future 5 cent could evaporate depending on the results of November. Even if the mix stays relatively the same and our sentiments about carving the fire station out of the next 1 cent cycle, even if that's the majority opinion, still, I'm looking at our past 1 cent allocations, and again, I just don't see the 15 million. If I'm on council, I will not advocate for reduction in streets. I'm going to advocate additional. So we did almost 22 million. I would like to get us to 7 million, 28 million over the 4-year cycle. I'm going to fight strongly for that if I'm on council at the time. I'd be curious if anyone would support removing the 2.6 million annual subsidy for water and sewer. That's going to be a tough sell. Reducing, we gave 5 million to fire this allocation, so we could say we'll take that fire and put it, we'll take that 5 million and put it towards your department and give you nothing for apparatus and training and equipment and the other things that they were going to spend it for this cycle. And so again, when I'm looking at the past 1 cent, I could be more comfortable with the concept of using the 5 cent to pay for this, because that's what I'd like to see the 5 cent used for, but I don't, unless somebody can convince me that we can carve that out of the next one, I just don't see the 10 to 15 there. So that's my concern, is that we punt it to the next 5 cent. We can't make the numbers work for the 5 cent. And now we're 4 to 6 years. Now the construction costs are astronomical. They're sleeping on wet cots and stuff because the walls are falling around, right? So that's my concern. Is that,
Cots.
I understand that's your concern.
Before that gets out in the press, I want to know if that's true. If people are sleeping on wet cots.
that was just something I threw out there.
I think that's really irresponsible,
Really?
Councilman, to sit there to suggest that the firemen are sleeping on wet cots and you're trying to lobby for this funding is damaging to this council, Kyle.
Okay, then
I would reframe that if that's the case.
Okay, I'll rescind that comment, Chief. If you don't mind answering, what do you see the status of fire station number 1 pending no, in 4 to 6 years? What's the, not sleeping on wet beds, to satiate, Councilor Pacheco's concern, where do you see the fire station being in 4 to 6 years if nothing's done?
Mr. Mayor, councilors, Fire Station 1 is not in the best shape. We continue to dump a lot of money into it. There was a time period here in the last few years where all of our personnel were actually sleeping in the bays on their beds, and having to sleep in the bays, jump in the apparatus and respond out. There was a bunch of mold and a lot of other mitigation that happened. It's an old dilapidated building and things continue to surface. And in another 6 years, I can't tell you how much more we're going to spend, a couple, 200-300 grand maybe, just to try and maintain it to where it is. And that's not going to address where we need to be and house the number of personnel and be able to respond appropriately, house our multi-genders and provide an environment that's safe and habitable and healthy for them to respond that way.
Okay, thank you. I apologize for my previously hyperbolic comments. I don't want your folks sleeping in puddles may have been hyperbolic. I don't want them sleeping on cots on the bay floor. So,
And
thank you.
The beds did get wet when they were washing apparatus.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, Chief. Now, we've already had the vote that said we're not going to fund it wholly. Now, is there an appetite for some type of a reduced funding amount? Yes or no?
I guess I haven't been convinced that's an option. It seems like it's the 2 million for design and parcel acquisition, and then it seems like the other chunk is kind of an all, that was the impression I came away with, is kind of an all or nothing. You can't lay the foundation and then explore building it out after that.
Mayor, Counselor, you know, the best estimate I've heard is it's on the high end, $3.2 million for design and land acquisition. The earmark is for $2 million. So that leaves a delta of $1.2 million. If we took the high end for design and land acquisition being 3.2, we take out the earmark for $2 million, that leaves a delta of 1.2 to make us whole based upon the current estimates for land acquisition and designs.
$2 million. Amber? Oh, that was for a thumbs up. Okay. $2 million for.
Design.
At 1.2, I was rounding it up to 2.
Okay.
Okay, basically, it's, according to the estimates that we had, it's 3.2 for land and design. The grant is for 2, so that leaves 1.2 unfunded.
Yeah.
I rounded that up to 2 to cover any incidentals that comes up. Design comes up a little high, a little more on land, but they have, as we would say in Louisiana, some land yup in there, long yup. So that's why I came up with the 2.
Okay.
Now,
Mayor, Council, I would just point out that should the tax pass and you not need the entire 2 million, you have the option of terminating the tax early.
Yes.
Because it is a specific use tax, you couldn't roll any excess funds over to another project or to general operations, but you could terminate it early. So I realize it's hard with, you know, laser precision to say it's gonna be, you know, $3,245,032. So that is the option.
that's why I went to the 2 million. And yes, basically, if these all totaled up to 35 and we only spent $1 million of that, then the $2 million early, the tax would end. Is that basically what
You
you're
have
saying?
that option there. That's correct.
Very good. I want no more lobbying. We're done with that. We've had the vote that it's not going to be funded.
I was gonna, it looks like the chief has something to say.
I was fixing to go there, but you raised your hand, but we're done with the lobbying.
Fair enough.
Chief.
Not exercise. Mr. Mayor, councilors, since everybody's in agreement that the full funding of it isn't a possibility right now.
We're not all in agreement.
Not all.
Well,
No, we're not all.
I'm not sure of the possibility of maybe half funding it and then coming up with the funding another way through the next 5th cent cycle or whatever else the city can come up with. I don't know if that's a possibility to explore right now, rather than having to come up with that entire 17.5 through other avenues that I don't really ever see happening. That's just throwing that out there, maybe.
That's, and here again, I didn't know where you might want to go. Let's check with our COO and our attorney.
Mayor, councilors, I still struggle with that concept because we can't build half a fire station. And because that $2 million that's earmarked, and we just got that money for the North Platte Interceptor Sewer, historically, it's taken a significant amount of time for that money to come in. So I struggle with dedicating whatever it's, I should be able to do that math, $7,000
But yeah,
to this, when we're still tied to that $2 million for the design and the land acquisition. Because the timing on that is 18 months to 2 years. So I struggle with having half the building out there when we're waiting for the design cost to come in from them.
Then my question back as a follow-up to that would be, should we go ahead and be looking at 4 million to cover the 3.2 in case the grant doesn't come through, but basically we can have the 3.2 June of next year to where we could get started on the design, land acquisition, and then backfill that when the grant comes in? Is that legally?
Our counselor, I struggle with the concept of backfilling a HUD grant for design and land acquisition. Given looking at those agreements and the requirements of those agreements, the idea that we would have spent our own money and then we tried to backfill our funding with that grant, I would really struggle with that.
That's why I was asking that. Okay.
Council, so I share those concerns and not having been intimately involved. I'm not sure if there's some supplanting issues. I just don't know that. I think when we discuss, partial funding, I think legally you could park the money, but then presuming that council and our CFO and city manager can find the rest of the funding within a reasonable period of time. And so since they're not here tonight, I feel like it's really difficult to make those determinations without finance weighing in and our city manager. There's a lot of variables, I think.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Jai?
Okay, well, I'll just say what I was gonna say, but it kind of goes against what you just said, Eric, so I'm not, I think if we can't reasonably hold on to that money, then I don't think it's worth it, but I think if we right now have an opportunity to raise some money for the fire station and we can park it or put it somewhere where it earns interest and then fill the rest of that funding in the next 5th cent cycle, I think that could potentially be an option if it's not illegal. I guess I think that we're sitting here thinking about dollars, and I think we need to remember that our citizens are going to come to the polls and they're going to see a project and they're going to say, do I want to spend a little bit extra money to support this project? And I feel that as a citizen, I want to support our fire station. I think many do. And I just think that if you talk about constructing a new facility that's built to suit what our firefighters need to do their job safely and with wellness in mind, I think that that is important for our voters right now to be able to decide on. So if we had, I guess my point is, I would support a half funding if we could get there. But I guess I don't know. It sounds like maybe that's not an option if we don't know the lease. Potential legal restrictions on holding on to that money, but I just think a lot of these are not going to get built in the next 2 years. Metro doesn't have a place to live either, doesn't have a design either. So we just need to use the consistent logic, I think, across the projects.
Did you have something, Michael? Okay. Basically, I think I got a thumbs up from $2 million for the fire. Do we still have that? Okay,
For what?
$2 million for fire.
But for specifically what? Because we have to say on the ballot
Oh,
what it's for.
the land and to supplement the $2 million grant.
And then we'll give it back if the 2 million
No,
comes
we
in.
won't give it. Yes.
And we don't have, I'm gonna
Yeah,
go down.
if design and everything comes in at $2 million on the nose, then no, we don't give it back. We stop the taxing short.
Okay.
Okay, we would only collect 33 instead of 35 million. Okay,
And so, if you don't mind,
do what?
for clarification, we would put that project at the very end of the collection cycle then, I'm assuming?
Mayor, Councilor, I think that's a question we'd have to run by our CFO and so I'm not exactly sure how that mechanically works. Another thing I would just add too, we do have a July 18th deadline, but I think the intent would be is to get an idea of the projects tonight so that staff can work with the county clerk to come up with the wording, but the intent would be to bring those back with the specific ballot language to you for final approval. So I know we've been going at this a while, but there will be another opportunity, albeit short, to revisit this before it's officially submitted. I don't know if that
You're killing me. I wanted this done. But yes, it is time to move on. So, one more question.
So when we describe what we're using on the ballot, what the money will be used for, can we not just say fire station number one project? Do we have to specifically say design and land? Or can we say $2 million for fire station number one? If design and land doesn't come through, it gets used for that. If it does, it gets used for the first $2 million of the 17 million that has to be funded.
Mayor Council, I don't think we need to be that specific, maybe in the wording. I mean, it would be for that
For
specific.
that project, some
Yeah.
part of it that,
When you look at Laramie, it was basically for the relocation and rebuilding of fire stations 5, 3, and a new one. So I mean, I don't think we need to get that granular. Now, at least legally. Now, when you're educating the public on how it's going to be used,
Yeah, it
that's
gets harder to
completely different.
explain, right? It's harder to explain rather than a specific, item, but we could look at going 3.2 for the design and land, making no assumptions that we're gonna get that earmark through it. It's not a guarantee. And then we've got a plan B to get that part done if none of the grant funding comes through. And if it does, then we, have some money into that project a little further down the road anyway.
Technically, by what I think Eric has said, is that if we allocated 3.2 for this and we get the $2 million grant, as soon as 1.2 million for that is generated, that's knocked off of it. We're done with that.
The tax is not dependent on the grant.
If we're just.
The tax is dependent on what you're going to use it for.
But if it's
Because
used for
this
fire
is a
station one,
specific for land and design.
but just say it's for fire station one
Right, Mayor.
on the ballot.
Council, I think that's the discussion. I mean, when I read the statute, I mean, it's fairly silent as to how granular you have to be in terms of describing the project. So you could describe the project as construction of fire station number one, relocation and construction of a new fire station number one. And if the earmark comes through and there's a delta of 1.2 million on the design and land acquisition, you could use part of that for that. The rest could be, in theory, banked for future construction. Now, if it's more discreetly described, then you'd probably have to go and take the action of ending that portion of the tax early. So there would be options, I guess.
So do we want to go from the 2 to 3.2? Councilor Hastings.
Just a kind of question. I feel like we're getting into how we did when we were doing the subsidies. It feels pretty unanimous. We want fire station number one on there in some aspect.
Yes.
So why don't we hit the rest of them and see how much is left?
Not a bad idea. Thank you. Okay. So. Where do we want to start? We could start with the second sheet of ice. Yep, start at the top. How does everybody feel for the 5 million there?
Yes.
Mayor, Council, I think it's, I would be remiss in not pointing out, so the 5 million that is on the list would be to get to the 20 million. It wouldn't supplant the 3.2 that's already been budgeted. And I would just, based on the earlier presentation, that is contingent upon fundraising and getting that certain goal. So I think if it is on there and it was successful, but the fundraising wasn't, and you got 5 million that's dedicated to a specific project, that you either have to figure out the funding or you have to terminate the tax. So I just, not advocating one way or the other for it, but just wanted to point that out.
Okay. Well, 26%. Okay, what's 26% of 20 million?
You know, I'm a social worker, right? Math isn't my strong suit.
It's 5.2.
This is total of 5.2 million.
26%
Of 20 million.
that'd be 5.2.
That's actually what I was gonna say, Tom. You're fine.
1.352.
Do what?
1.352.
26% of 20 million is 1.352 million.
What are you trying to figure?
Basically, we had committed 3.2 million to a $12 million project. That, according to Ray's math, was 26% of that project. Okay? I'm trying to figure out what 26% of the 20 million would be.
5.2. I was right.
It's 5.6 million.
I was like a cat on
Okay,
keyboard.
what they're asking for now is 8 million. 8.2 million.
They're asking for.
They're asking the taxpayers for that. They're not.
What?
They're asking the taxpayers for that. They're not asking us to come up with that out of our other funds.
Right.
But what I'm getting at though is they are asking taxpayers to do that. But in the bigger scheme of things, if they were going to raise, I'm gonna use round numbers now, if they were gonna raise 75%, then I think we should only be asking the taxpayers to come up with 25%, which is what the original proposal was. So
I don't follow your
that's,
logic.
do what?
So I don't follow your logic on
No.
that.
Very convoluted.
I think the point is though that they get to decide.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so if we put it on there, taxpayers get to decide if they do it.
Very good.
This is just one more fundraising for them, so I support it.
Yeah.
A whole 5 million. Everybody else there? No. Okay. So that's a yes. Pete? Number 2 is the auxiliary gym. Oh, no, wrong list. Overland chairlift replacement. Looks like that's a yes. Fast pitch softball fields. Next. Where are we on the fast pitch softball fields?
Can we hold on it and move to the next one?
Next one's Fire Station 1.
Oh, next. Not the-
Next is the 911 dispatch center.
I think that we do 5 million for that one. Equipment only 5
Yep.
million.
Upgrading equipment.
Which one are you on?
I was actually, I don't recall us getting a status update on that building anytime in the recent past, and so I would just be curious to know where we're at with the Casper Business Center. What, this is for just dispatch, but I'd be curious to know where we're at with IT, municipal court, and police department.
No, all this is for is just for the dispatch. And really, if we drop back to the 5 million, is just for new equipment. As opposed to, we already have in the budget to move the existing equipment and the build out to this building. Is that correct?
Mayor, Council, that's correct.
Okay.
So we just need to equipment, right?
So yes, 5 million would be strictly for new equipment.
My hesitation with that is the equipment looks like it's supposed to reach end of life in 2028, which is 4 years from now, and so that would be my hesitation. It does sound like we have a little bit of a runway on that. It's not bad to be proactive about replacing equipment, but 4 years is a pretty decent length of time for that stuff reaching end of life.
That's about when we would be moving in. I don't know what lead time is going to be on that equipment.
I have, it says right here that they already have, we get chiefs here, we can ask them about the equipment, but it already says that the equipment is quite old and obsolete in a lot of different areas, so they are gonna need the upgrades when they move to a full system, the better facility for it. So I don't know where the,
2028 is just vendor tech.
vendor technical support. They already have equipment that is obsolete, so I still support for technology upgrades, yes,
You do support or don't support?
do for 5 million.
Well, we got the chief here. I think it'd be a shame if we didn't at least ask him for some input and additional context. He knows better than us.
We'll get both corners of the building tonight.
Mayor, council, the equipment that we're currently using at the dispatch center is already past its prime. The concern that we have is as we are having the opportunity to move dispatch into the Casper Business Center to reinstall equipment that's not going to be valid for any length of purpose. It's the workstations also, so it's not just the hardware, it's the workstations that the dispatchers are working at, that stuff is way past its prime also. So, without getting into a whole lot of detail, there is ongoing concerns on the remaining lifetime of the equipment that we have. The workstations themselves they're way past their prime, the actual workstations.
So is our 5 million, 2 million a correct breakdown?
Mr. Mayor, I would have to do some research on that. I would hate to offer a guess on it.
That's what we were told earlier in the meeting, so that's why I came up with that number.
So I trust the information that my people submitted for these considerations, and so I would have to go with that.
Thank you.
To Councilor Bond made the point. Do I have the floor? Sorry, I might have been preemptive.
Do what?
Do I have the floor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was checking over here to see if there was anybody else with a hand over
Councilor
here.
Bond made a point earlier that some of these allocations are for facilities that provide countywide countywide services. So I'm curious, the dispatch center, the operating agreements that we have with anyone else that utilizes the dispatch center. I guess I'm looking for confirmation that those are all City of Casper employees, and if part of any of those operating agreements include any sort of contribution towards capital expenses, or historically as the City of Casper shouldered the burden of capital expenses. Thank you.
Chief.
Mayor, council, these are great questions. So I would tell you that historically, it has been a hodgepodge of circumstances. Some of those capital improvements we've shouldered because they needed to get done. Others we have over time brought to the user group for their contributions on those. And right now we're in a position where those things are shared amongst the user groups. However, just as is the case in Metro, the City of Casper is the one that carries by far and away the largest burden on that. So we do reach out to these user entities because we do provide those emergency services for all of Natrona County. And there's a bunch of those user groups, and it is according to the approximate share of their use of that we extend those expenses to them.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you, chief. Okay. 911 dispatch. 5 million, yay or nay? Yay, 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 yay. There's 4, 5, 6. Okay. 5 million for the 911. Metro Animal, we were all in agreement on that earlier. Okay. Auxiliary gym at the rec center. That's 3.6 million. I have one. Oh, no, she's giving me a thumb. First of all, before I go to thumbs, questions. Yes, sir.
Mayor, councilors, just in the interest of trying to clarify some questions, we do have a memo. I don't have a problem for each of these giving you a very brief description of what this includes. So maybe we'll try and address some of the questions that are maybe ruminating amongst people when they're forward. So if it's entirely up to you, but on the build a new auxiliary gym, I'd be glad to share.
Go for it.
Just a very brief.
Go for it.
So gym space is at a premium. We always need more gym space at the rec center. And at the rec center, we keep that gym space open a lot so that we can maximize the use by the public. But we always have people that want to rent the gym. So this is actually a revenue positive thing for the rec center. It helps us with that subsidy because if we build an auxiliary gym, it gives us the opportunity to rent that gym out for volleyball, basketball, different events, but still have a gymnasium that's open for the general public use. So it's a significant cost item. The benefit from the standpoint of the community is how much the rec center gets used, and it's subsidy positive for the recreational fund.
I
Thank
still have that question.
Do what?
I still have my question,
Go for it.
just to let you know. So, I'll tell you straight up why I'm hesitant on that. I know that you're over, like a lot of people use that facility all the time. I know it's always overcrowded. I know there's never enough room space. So my only worry is like, why do that when we have this beautiful facility at the sports ranch that's pretty much gonna do the same thing and offer those opportunities? Right? I mean, they have volleyball, they're gonna have all the different sports. So that's where my kind of hesitation comes in.
I agree. I think the sports ranch is going to provide an incredible opportunity, and especially for club sports and club sports training and tournaments. I think a lot of the folks on the rec center are the people that are maybe less fortunate that live fairly close around there and use that facility. And I know from all the time I volunteered at the YMCA, it seemed like we could never build enough gymnasiums in this town when we're juggling between the school districts and everybody else wanting to have gyms. But I cannot discount the point that you made about those gyms being available.
I'm just hesitant on that one, so, I mean, I understand it, but we have a lot of other rec things down here too.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, just because I've talked to some people at the Wyoming Sports Trends, I think it's the niche is really going to be club teams, people utilizing. It's not going to be rental per se. As far as individual teams coming in and saying I can do that, but it's going to be more big tournaments. I think it's going to be utilization of those things. And so this for the rec center is more about gym space in the sense of could be teams wanting, that want to rent it for an economic price and wanting to do those types of things, and closer to, because the gym space is being used quite a bit all over the city for Lifetime, YMCA. They're all crowded, and so that's the way I kind of see it in that sense. So that's what I think.
So where are you in supporting?
I'll support the auxiliary gym.
Thank you, Mayor. I was just curious if Sue Lima or anyone else could provide some further details in regards to the potential for increased revenue and reduction of the subsidy. I don't know if we have any sort of rough estimates, but that would help me make a decision.
Mayor, Counselor, good question. We can do homework, certainly to give you a better figure, because we don't readily have that available, but we should be able to identify the hours of programming that we can apply to the gym and get that number to you. I apologize for not being better.
Sorry, everything's valuable. Could you follow up? Could you remind us what the current subsidy is at the rec center?
She's had enough tests on things earlier today.
Mayor, Counselor, give us a minute, we should be able to.
Thank you. I got numbers from like 3 years ago, but I don't know what.
We'll bypass the gym while we wait on that.
Perfect.
If that's okay, and we'll go ahead and drop down to the Washington Park band shell reconstruction. Do you have any comments on that?
Mayor and Councilors, yeah, this is one of a couple projects that we're also trying to get some grant funding. Now, I will tell you that 1.5 million covers the complete cost for the band shell, but there's other improvements that are planned at Washington Park. And again, one of the reasons why I know from a staff level why this one rose up to a certain level is the use that band shell gets. We got Pops in the Park with the Symphony. This year we've got, you know, we would certainly not get this improved by the time that Bear Trap Festival is here. But again, they're just playing the municipal band on a regular basis. And so it gets a lot of usage. And I know some of the musician types are fairly critical of that band shelter. I won't pretend to understand that because I'm not a musician, but I understand, you know, and so again, I think this is a facility and an amenity that gets a breadth of use in our community, the whole community. I don't think just Casper. And I think it's important for our overall rejuvenation of one of our real gems in our park system, which is Washington Park.
And if I'm correct, isn't it a historical landmark, close to being one? I don't know if it's on the register or not.
Mayor, Counselor, it is not currently on the registry. So because of its age, it is considered a historic building.
Councilor Powell.
I'll just say, I like this one because of the synergy. There are other projects that are already funded that are gonna be happening in the park, and so being able to sort of put a bow to some extent on that park and feel like we've done a relatively significant overhaul, to me, that it's just a nice, you know, supplement to the stuff that we've already got planned for that park.
Also want to say too, just briefly, is that sitting on the municipal band, what do you call it, committee? They have expressed several concerns with that, just for safety concerns too. There's mold, there's all kinds of stuff, the floor's falling out, they have a hard time walking up, it's not ADA, so anyways, there's a whole laundry list. It's well overdue, there's constant flooding underneath it. I mean, it's something that it should be taken care of, and it's just needs attention. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up. Okay. Mike Cedar Draw Pathway.
Mayor, councilors, this is a pathway that has been envisioned for, I remember being at a charrette 20 years ago. And this ties Mike Cedar Park and Yesness Pond. And again, they just recently had another design charrette. So this is a project that fits very well into that. It's been master planned for a long time. And again, this is just basically the cost for the concrete pathway that would connect Yesness Pond all the way down to Mike Cedar Park. Traditionally, and especially from our park master plan, park amenities, but especially pathways, are one of the top items in our survey that showed up as something that the community supports. And so based upon that recent survey, we felt that it was important to have a pathway project on the slate of items in the ballot.
The thumbs up or
No.
question? She's voting for it.
Not voting for it. I have a question, or not even a question, a comment. So I'm on the other side of this. I say no to this. I understand the importance to the pathways, but I don't like this improvement over here for several reasons. It's a hidden gem. As far as dog walkers, it's not crowded. People can go there, and I get what everybody in the connectivity of how they want it to the park, but there is a lot of users in this community that use that area because it's not safe and because it's they get the experience, the organic experience of when they're on the trails, and they use it for training. It's when they're doing 100-milers and they're doing the trail runs, and they need that rugged landscape, but they need for mountain biking, BMXing, they want trail runners, all of those people, and the dogs. You know, there's a lot of game trails out there, a lot of wildlife, antelope, and they love that area. So I'm pressed for preserving it the way it is. And it's, you know, it has a little creek running through there, and there's kids that go and play outside in real nature. That's not just in a bubble and pretty, but they actually have that availability. They can go get muddy in the pond, they can catch frogs, they can catch mice, they can do whatever. It's a natural landscape, and so I'm want to preserve it the way it is. I understand the connectivity, and there's plenty of trails that are halfway there, and I use it all the time the way it is. And there's not a problem with it. There's a handful of people out there that I think would support not doing anything with it. So that's my 2 cents.
Councilor Powell.
I love a wild space, so that's great. But I'm wondering if, Zulima, do you have any information from users? I'm getting an understanding that you know, there's another trail proposed by the trails. I want to get a trail on here because I do think it's a super important part of our community and a well-supported part of our community. To me, the one that was proposed at McKinsey Lake is not, the timing's not good until we get a few other projects completed in advance. So do you have any information on this project specifically, why it kind of rose to the top and what users are telling you about it?
Mayor and Councilor, so I can say we did have the charrette a couple of weeks ago. I was working the table to talk to community members that attended the charrette about this particular project. Certainly there was some concern among a few of the neighbors in the alignment regarding, you know, wildlife and viewscapes and having people too close to their properties and safety and security kind of concerns. But I can say the overwhelming majority of people really supported the project and were excited about the concept. As it is budgeted or estimated for the budget right now, it is actually a hard surface trail with a soft surface trail adjacent. So it would be both. You would have a concrete trail that would support multi-use, including, you know, moms with their strollers or dads with their strollers and bicycles and walkers. But there would be a soft surface trail as well, adjacent for, you know, the soft surface trail runners, mountain bikes, those kinds of things. And the idea being, and this was actually recommended by our master plan consultant, that you could, you know, limit user conflict if we did both.
Fine.
Any other questions?
Thanks. Zulima, I was just curious because I thought of the initial proposed projects, the pump track was part of it, and I don't see it on this list. Could you give some context in regards to how it didn't make the cut?
Absolutely. So Mayor and Councilor, in conjunction with some work with the Central Wyoming Trails Alliance, we were able to secure a $45,000 design grant for Mike Cedar Park proper. So the vision is to make Mike Cedar Park an all-wheel park. It would include a mountain bike skills park, a skate park for skateboarding, a bicycle playground for smaller kids adjacent to the existing playground, as well as the pump track. And so because we got the grant to do the design, we just felt it was a little premature to include the park improvements in this cycle. However, once the design is done and the full vision for that park comes together, and we'll start doing public outreach and then start looking for grant opportunities and other funding mechanisms to get the park done. This certainly contributes to that in adding safe connectivity in a number of neighborhoods to get kids and users to a park. But we certainly do acknowledge that there is some public concern. The city owns the entirety of the drainage. So we could construct along the drainage, and that's how it was proposed and shown in the charrette. That being said, there are opportunities to adjust the alignment and use some other access points to get away from some of those properties that I think have the primary concerns. So hopefully that would create a compromise that several groups could be happy with.
Thanks. Follow up if I could. I'm not a rec user in that area. I know you're really tied in with the Natrona County Outdoor Collaborative and Trails Alliance and all those other folks. And so what is your read on those folks and their support of this project? My guess is you wouldn't be proposing it if it didn't have user group support, but
Mayor, Councilor, so as was alluded, you know, we did the Parks and Rec master plan, and there was a survey component where we got almost 1,000 responses from citizens, and certainly trails, softball fields rose to the top. Those were the two areas where there and indoor rec space, excuse me. So those three really rose to the top in terms of what the citizens said they wanted to see. You know, absolutely, the Wild Sports Ranch is going to provide a fantastic facility. According to the experts doing our Parks and Rec master plan, that facility is likely to not meet the demand on its own. And so that is why we proposed the auxiliary gym. From Currently, there are no softball fields that were designed for fast pitch softball, which is of course now a high school sanctioned sport in our community and a growing club sport in our community. And because there are no assets dedicated to fast pitch softball, it also rose to the top in terms of the master plan. You know, certainly the users now are using 13th and Sycamore, which master plan consultants are actually going to recommend we decommission for safety reasons. Even if they stayed active, they can only be used for practice because they're not regulation size for games. And so we're using full-size rec league softball fields with temporary fencing to meet the need for fast pitch softball. And so, I mean, just to add some color as to why, again, these were selected based on feedback that we got from the master plan, which of course you guys unfortunately won't hear for another several weeks or a month. But we were able to capture that data from the survey and give the preliminary recommendations from the master plan consultants to inform the projects we're proposing to you tonight.
Thank you. But the outdoor collaborative did not weigh in on this specific trail project, just trails in general. There's broad support for.
Mayor, Councilor, so in terms of the outdoor rec collaborative, they have expressed support for what was described as a Mike Cedar, Casper College, Yesness Pond sort of bigger, you know, project vision. And so to carve this out and say there was specific collaborative support for this may not be, you know, maybe a little disingenuous, but in general, the collaborative did support a holistic look at Casper College property adjacent to Mike Cedar, adjacent to Yesness.
Thank you.
Answer your question from before, FY25 is budgeted at just shy of $600,000 in rec subsidy.
And that's
For
separate.
recreation center, just on film,
Yeah, not aquatic center.
not aquatic center, just recreation.
Thank you.
Now,
I'm just gonna.
we have to move on. But go ahead.
Go ahead.
Nope,
Nope, I don't have a thing to say.
we have allocated an hour for this. We have spent over 2 hours discussing these. I realize they are important, but we do need to move on. Who's in favor of the Mike Cedar draw pathway? No, no, 1, 2, 3. Oh, good.
What is it? Was it four?
Huh?
Was it four?
Less money for your fire station.
4 to 4, yes, so I need to vote.
Oh.
Oh,
Can I make a comment, Steve? I know you said we need to go. I'll just say my rationale. I feel like we don't have a consensus yet on the right pathways, trails project to put on there. That there's some difference between maybe what we're thinking versus what Trails is thinking. So I'm wondering if we throw back to fast pitch softball, if that was the other thing that really rose to the top. Maybe we pause on Trails and go to something that we already have really established some clarity on direction.
well, it was 4 to 4 and I will go with the no side. So we'll go no there. I do like the idea based on some of Salima's comments about the softball. Well, first of all, we have the McKenzie Trail, which we talked about earlier, which was 825. I want to make sure we're all still in agreement there, that we do not want to do that at this time.
Yeah.
Yep, I see a bunch of, okay, thank you. So do we want to go back to two things, softball fields and the auxiliary gym? So the auxiliary, which are you wanting to comment on?
I mean, it looks like we have an $11 million buffer, so if we can fit them all in. I mean, we're only at 23, right?
Yeah. Then we need to talk about the fire station again.
Well, it sounded like our hands were tied to a certain extent on that.
Well, to a point. Okay, who all's in favor of the auxiliary gym? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay. So the auxiliary gym And what happens if you put in the softball fields?
30,600,000.
Do what?
30,600,000.
So that leaves, and we already had what? 2 million in for the fire station?
Don't have anything.
Nothing.
Oh, nothing yet. Okay. Then I would be in favor of going ahead and putting the balance into the fire station, since we can carry that over as kind of the seed money for future use.
That's appropriate.
There's some discomfort about how we would manage that.
Yeah.
There's some avenues for it, but it could be a little. Well, you know, that's, yeah.
Mayor and Councilor, just from the standpoint of math, if we were $35 million, that would make that $4,400,000 for the fire station number 1.
Okay.
Is it 32 or 35 that we're working?
35.
Oh,
You're right.
The talk.
Yeah, because that's showing 30,000. Yeah,
30,600,000.
Yeah, you've got the bigger screen. Thank you. Do we want to do that? Do we want to put any money towards the fire station? Do we want to leave the softball fields in? Who's in favor of leaving the softball fields in?
I think it's a necessity. Right.
Put the
Enough
4.4
going on.
in fire in the fire.
Do it.
Put 4.4 in the fire.
I'm trying to figure out if we take the softball out, that gives more to the fire. But no, I'm fine with that.
Yep, do we have enough thumbs for the softball field? We did, okay.
Yes, I thought we did. Go ahead and, are we all okay with putting 4.4 in for the fire?
up to 4.5, as long as we can retain it until we get CBDG money.
Yeah, Mayor, councilors, again, I don't know that there's not a time frame in statute that you have to expend it by. It's collected, it's earmarked for that. Ability to end the tax earlier. The consideration, frankly, would be from a political standpoint, collecting a tax, no immediate plan to deploy it, essentially banking it until the rest of the funding can be found or made available. That certainly is a policy call for you all to make, kind of legal question.
So I have a question. I know you wanted, but
Go ahead.
so my question is, CDBG money, 18 to 24 months out. This tax will only be in place for 2 years. We don't know what potential overage there will be, if any, you know, what that gap is after the block grant funding to cover the shortfall. And so I'm wondering if we've not yet expended the block grant funding and don't know what that shortfall is, and we've already begun collecting the tax revenue in this line item, up to 4.4 million. What happens if we're in a position where we've collected more than is necessary to cover the shortfall is my question. And are we allowed to?
Counselor, yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. And I think that earlier discussion was centered around how it would be presented on the ballot. So if it was, you know, specifically for design and land acquisition, then it would be a little dicier. But if it was just for fire station number 1 more broadly, then, you know, any overage over what was to be covered by the earmark could then be applied towards construction or, you know, something down the road, I think. Frankly, Mayor, Council, I think our CFO could probably weigh in a little bit more because she's handled Fifth Cent and how it's processed. And it may, from an administrative standpoint, be a land. So I would.
Mayor and Councilor, you know, again, our plan here is to now go through the language that we put in this and what that looks like. And so to me, we have not a bunch of time, but we have a week there where we can work on that language, work very close with finance. Eric can do some more follow-up on legal, and we can make sure that we, you know, put language in there that is most beneficial and flexible that meets, I think we understand very clearly what your desires are on fire station number one. And we can craft that language that gives us the most flexibility to make sure that those funds can be available for that project. And then ultimately have to take it to the county clerk. And then that final language will come before this council on the 16th to be approved.
Councilor Pollock.
I'll just make the statement. I would be supportive of either 4.4, or if it seems more appropriate based on the kind of more concrete numbers that we have right now, is to keep it at the 3.2, to say that is our stopgap measure if we don't get the grant. But if we do, then it can become part of Fire Station 1. So that way we're not, if it doesn't come through and we've collected 4.4, then we have 3.2 into design and land, and then we've got a random 1.2 that's now sitting around as well. So if it feels more clean to say we're doing 3.2 because that's the number for the design, the land, I'm okay with that too. Either way, based on your analysis over the next week.
I guess to a point, I would be concerned that we need to leave it as general as possible, because we don't want DC to think that we're already setting up the money to take care of the grant. That's why I think the 4.4 plus that gets you 6.4 into the 19 that we need, which gets you then down to 13, which starts on the overall, which starts to help out on the 5th cent for the rest of the bill.
Yeah, I support that too. I said I support both.
Yeah.
Whichever one is more appropriate based on the
Okay.
analysis. I'm happy either way.
So are we happy with this and going with 4.4 for the fire station? Then we move on. Okay. Building code updates.
Yeah. Mayor, Councilor,
Like my jump back.
this is the ICC updates, and I think I'm going to turn this over to Eric, the city attorney, to address first of all, and then if there are any questions as well, Mr. Scott is here in the audience as well, patiently ready to address those questions and maybe come forward.
Questions? Comments? Everybody understand why we're doing it? We're all good for approval?
Do you want me to make it controversial?
No, right.
Please, and think of something, I'm sure.
Now comes the next interesting one then. The statutory changes for synthetic THC products.
Mayor, councilors.
Oh, hang on. Thank you, Justin, for being here. Appreciate it.
All right.
Sorry you had to sit through all of that, but thank you.
Mayor, councilors, as we know and we discussed, and there are some questions about some recent statutory changes in the last session regarding some synthetic THC compounds. And so again, with that, I think I'll turn it over to the city attorney and let him help clarify a very challenging issue.
Thank you, Mayor, councilors. And so I think what I'll really do is kind of tee this up, and then I'll turn it over to Chief McFeeters to address some of these concerns. We were able to meet internally. There were a number of changes made to state statute regarding the production of hemp. And by and large, that does not affect us. I think that the chief will address that the biggest change came to the addition of Delta 8 to Schedule 1. From my perspective, as the city attorney and prosecuting under our city ordinance, we believe that at this point, there's no ordinance change necessary to address that change statute. As far as the police department's plan to handle this change, which goes into effect July 1st, I'll, if I might, turn it over to Chief McFeeters.
Mayor, council, we're trying to be responsive to the query that came in. You know, there is some timeliness issues here. So we've had a chance to kind of review this legislation, and I've had a chance to meet with the city attorney's office. I've had a chance to meet with the district attorney. So that we can get a pretty good consensus on what the plan would be moving forward. So it is our intent now to, having tried our best to answer the questions of council tonight, we would be moving forward with kind of an outreach and education process to our local retailers, informing them of, I'm sure they're all tracking it, but we're going to do our best to make sure that they're aware of these changes. When it was added to the Schedule 1, prohibited substances, there's no way to legally possess it. And so, you know, in the chapter governing hemp products, it makes it illegal to sell it, to transport it for sale, to possess it with the intent to sell. But it's really that Schedule 1 listing of it that makes it very difficult. So that if they're gonna transfer their product to another state, to another location, they need to get on it, because after June 30th at midnight, it's gonna be very problematic for them. And so it's our intent to reach out to them this week, kind of update them where we're at, what our expectations are, and answer any questions that they may have. So they would have, if they've not been tracking this, then they would have fair warning on it. But as it is, we believe that we have a process in place. So if any of these cases were brought forward through the municipal court, that they would be able to handle it for the time being.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Chief.
Garrett?
So Mike, it sounds like the expectation then is that July 1, they do not have any of these products either on shelves or in the back room. Theoretically, they should be not in the city, not in the state. Is that the expectation?
On July 1, Mayor, Councilor, on July 1, it's going to be unlawful to possess this in any way, shape, or form. And so we would be hard pressed to have me stand up here and say, yeah, but we're not going to worry about it for the time being. So the answer to your question is yes, but they should have already been planning for this eventuality. As soon as that was signed into law, I'm sure that they were tracking it, and they've had plenty of advance notice.
Follow up if I may. Does the department have any plans to, July 1, do you plan on going to visit all these shops to make sure they're conforming with the statute, or how do you plan on, is it gonna be mostly complaint driven? Are we gonna rely on customers of these shops to report those products to you? What do you see as the plan? Are you gonna wait for problems to come to you, or are you gonna be, going out and seeing if people are complying with the new law?
Mayor, council, I would submit to you, it would be improper for me to discuss tactical operations and things of that nature. Our first and foremost priority is to meet with them in advance, to educate them and to encourage compliance. Anything that occurs after that, will be done with due consideration for circumstances, just as we always do. I have no plans in place for July 1, showing up in force and inspections. I have no plans in place for that. Our primary goal, as it is always, is to educate and to gain compliance before it becomes a criminal matter.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Thank you, chief. Guess we're down to agenda review.
Councilor, I do not have any.
Council around the table.
One item, the agenda review.
Do what?
I actually have one item on the agenda review, if you don't mind.
Okay,
I saw that at one point we had an update from Republic who manages the parking garage on our agenda review, and it seems like they dropped off, or maybe maybe I don't remember having that conversation, but I was expecting an update from the parking garage folks, and I thought it was on the agenda, and now I don't see it on the agenda, and so if it's not on the agenda, I would like it on.
Mayor, Counselor, yeah, I think, and that's been a dynamic situation, with those folks over there, with Liz being out of town. And I'm not sure she would have been here tonight anyway, but yeah, we could certainly follow up. I will put that on my list, to follow up with you on that and check on the status of that. But I also know there's been a lot of discussion around that. And frankly, part of it is the, construction space that we need for remodeling the Casper Business Center. That includes that parking lot is there as well. So there's some dynamic situations that are taking place, with parking downtown and with Republic.
Okay. Whatever, at whatever time it's most appropriate.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
anything else? Council around the table. Start with Councilor Pollock.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. I was out of town last week, so there are a few meetings that I'll not be able to provide you with an update for, but hopefully some of my fellow liaisons will be able to. I do have, we're closed now, the end of this fiscal year, so I've got economic development joint powers tomorrow to make the final approval of that budget, and then same deal on Friday for Amoco reuse agreement joint powers board. So I'll be in attendance to make sure those budgets are compliant with the deadline, and report back to you next week about anything that comes to those meetings.
Councilor Bond.
Thank you, Mayor. Let's see, I was able to attend the presentation. Zalima and Devine did a great job of their presentation at the shooting complex committee. So I just want to say thank you for that. That was, even though we were not successful. But, and then the only other thing I kind of wanted to say was that, as I was kind of looking through that list of the 6 cent projects, I had to put on my over 60 hat. So raise your hand if you're over 60. Okay. So as I try to think of voter appeal, how is this going to play with voters? I think the good news is that it's a general election, so the turnout should be good. I think that's in our favor. But I think in terms of appeal, and I know, certainly people over 60 are grandparents and they want to have good amenities for their grandchildren that live here as well. But I still have a lot of heartburn with the fire station. I feel like that's just kicking the can, and construction costs are going to go up. I understand why we made the decision we did, but it's causing me some dismay. So that's all.
Councilor Jensen.
I have nothing.
Councilor Pacheco.
Hey, this was a really tough debate and a tough time for us to have these conversations. Anytime we're talking about these taxes, always a lot of emotion, kind of what, Mike had said, that it was, tough for him. And I think you can get passionate about these projects. And I've been on both sides, one that I've really supported, didn't get, things that I've supported, and it can be frustrating. But the process is imperfect, but it's good. We argue, we dealt with Steve several times, and, jumped on Kyle, which I apologize that I should have been a little bit more, being more attuned to you as the mayor. So I apologize to staff and I apologize to Kyle. And you're going to find that we get down those roads to do that. And I hope that the process works. You got to make tough decisions, and tough decisions not always easy. And no matter what decision we make, people on Facebook are going to say, no taxes, this or that. And so this is tough decisions that we make as a council, but I wouldn't be with any other council than this one to go down the pike and fight with. So.
Councilor Haskins.
Make it short and sweet. I went to the groundbreaking for public health last week. Also had a public health meeting, but aside from that, I have nothing. politics in the park, the council's done, so. Commissioners, if anybody wants to know who you're voting for.
Thanks.
Councilman Gamroff.
Apologies in advance. I know I've heard my voice a lot this evening and you're probably sick of it. But I appreciate Councilor Pacheco's points. I'm glad we had a spirited discussion. You know, in all fairness, we were talking about $30 million in an additional 1% tax tonight. I spent just as much time reviewing grant applications for our 20,000 in community promotions. And so, you know, it's all relative. I felt like the 2 hours that we spent is worth it. And maybe we'll have potential to talk about it a little bit more next week. I had a homelessness coalition task force meeting last Wednesday. The police department reported less organized transport from surrounding communities. But one local service provider did report that they had received 5 people from Rapid City, South Dakota recently who received bus tickets out of town, likely in part due to a local shelter in Rapid City closing last December. And so just really hoping that the state helps us out with some of these larger issues that kind of extend beyond our municipal boundaries. That's why I was glad the chief testified to Joint Judiciary and was glad to join him, because I just feel like the state really needs to help us out in getting control of this issue. Rescue missions continuing their street outreach. Many thanks to all the volunteers who offer to go out on the streets and connect with folks and refer them to resources. Jim, the ED at Central Wyoming Counseling Center, reported that starting July 1, they'll begin offering twice a week transport to and from Fremont County to get people back to their home community. I was really excited to hear that, because you might remember previous updates I've given of Native American folks making up a disproportionate amount of folks seeking services and ending up in our municipal jail. So glad that there's going to be a lot more transport to and from Fremont County. At Metro Task Force meeting last Wednesday, we discussed new contracts with surrounding municipalities, excluding Evansville, who, you know, is doing their own thing now. The quote for kennels came back about 30% higher in order to conform with our city building codes. And so my guess is we'll see that in some form an amendment or additional ask. I apologize, Chief, I'm failing to remember the details, but didn't sound like there was any potential for us to reform codes to get rid of that, just due to our climate and our weather. Things just got to be built a little bit tougher here. So, and then the facility assessment for Metro should be coming up in the near term. I forget when exactly on the agenda. At a Casper Housing Authority board meeting last Thursday. You might have seen they had significant damage at Willard, which is going to be their new primary location and hub. It was about $20,000 in damages, unfortunately. They can't make any modifications to that building. A lot of folks were wondering why they didn't have cameras. They can't install cameras because they don't have the notice to proceed. So trying to work through that process as quickly as possible. They have upcoming deadlines on when they have to have used their ARPA and their CDBG funds. It's coming up this fall. So just really feeling the pressure to expend those funds before those deadlines. They had a great Father's Day event a couple weekends ago. Very nice. If you've never been, I'd encourage you to go next year. Yeah, Politics in the Park for Ward 2 and 3 was last Wednesday. It was a great event. We missed a couple of the candidates that were running, but I was glad to have met a couple folks that I was not familiar with. Just hope there's better turnout for futures. It's a really great event. I want to thank the Northern County Republican Women again for hosting that. County Commissioners is this week, as Councilor Haskins said, 5:30 tomorrow night. I'd encourage you to go. Had Politics on the Flat at the Tate Pump House yesterday. I want to thank the Chamber for hosting that. It was a great turnout. Spoke to a lot of people about issues like 5th cent, 6th cent, MRG, and other hot button stuff. I'll just say, lastly, I'll cut out some of this stuff. It's been a long night, but I know we recently allocated a third of our annual budget to relocate Garden Creek Falls, but if we could have Zulima go back to the drawing board, we could save some money on that. I think people are on board with the concept. The $70 million, though, I think just had some sticker shock. So if we could refine those numbers, it'd be great. Otherwise, that's all I got. Thanks.
Tom, it was on Facebook.
All I have is, so I was at the Homelessness Coalition meeting as well. Did you share the application ratio?
I did not.
Okay, so I think the only thing I'll add is that, I mean, we obviously have a great housing authority that does everything it can to house individuals in need in our community. But what we're hearing now is that there's a 5-to-1 ratio in terms of applicants to eligibility. So that means 4 out of 5 people who are applying for housing are not receiving it. And I think it's a pretty big demonstration of the kind of need. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to find some solutions to offer more affordable housing, especially to people who aren't eligible to. A lot of that is because they're not eligible for federally funded housing due to certain substance abuse or other issues. So it's a major need and it's causing an impact on our system. Additionally, I had the LGBTQ advisory committee meeting. Just quickly, it sounds like, and Amber, maybe you know the specific number, but there were well over 1,000 people in attendance at the main Pride event on the 9th. Am I right about that date? So just great attendance at Pride this year. Obviously Pride is month long, but also the committee is working on an information campaign to provide information to the LGBTQ community around the non-discrimination ordinance to make sure that people have access to information about the ordinance, as well as understand kind of what their mechanisms for support through that ordinance are. So we'll be working with the city to come out with some information sharing for that. That's all I got.
Lots of meetings last week, government meeting. Went to visit Casper today. It's just been a steady stream of meetings every single day, so it's just attending a lot of meetings. It's kind of a bummer that we did not get the shooters complex, but that means that we can have that space for something else. Go ahead, tell you.
I attended several meetings last week and also this presentation to the committee for the shooters complex. And then again, the questions this morning. I personally was very disappointed in the committee itself. They ran our committee and our chairman, Salima, through the ringer yesterday morning, constantly on issues that were actually beyond the scope of what the presentation was. One of the particular applicants that is left did not even fill out all of the criteria that were asked for, and it got promoted through. And it seems like this has been more of a political, predetermined process than it was a true, fair competition. That's my personal opinion. I don't know how everybody else felt that was there, but that it was my personal opinion, and I was very disappointed in the members of that committee. I want to sincerely thank Salima and everybody that participated in the preparation of our presentation. You met every criteria, you met everything, you answered all of their questions. All I heard from a lot of the others as well, we'll have to get back with you. That means they didn't fill out and they didn't investigate. We had industry come on our behalf stating that one of their big objections was to the wind here, that people appreciate the wind. Those places are sought after by our military and by other organizations. That didn't seem to play into it at all. Anyhow, I'm going to stop there. And the other sad note is that I don't know how many are aware, but Buck King passed away this past week. Come on. He served on the Regional Joint Powers Board for over 17 years, many of those as chairman. He was also on the town of Edgerton as a council member for 2 years, and then as the mayor for 17 years. He was a veteran from our military from the Vietnam era, dedicated public servant. His military honors will be at the Oregon Trail Veterans Cemetery tomorrow at 11 a.m. We lost a great person there. Our condolences to the family and the friends to Buck. That's all I have. Thank you all for being here tonight. And I apologize